Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking about a probably more optimistic subject in esports, which is the future of esports. And joining us is Roald Van Buuren, who formerly worked for Fnatic, and then he worked for FACEIT. So this was pre-acquisition and the consolidation of ESL into FACEIT and one entity. And he's been making some very interesting posts on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it about what the future of esports look like, which, in case you were wondering, it's kind of a return, a lot of people think, to the past and what was a lot of community-driven narratives and initiatives. And this is really important because basically, for a lot of contemporary esports fans, you would have seen this industry modeled very directly off of traditional sports. As the audience exploded kind of after 2011, 2012, the rise of live streaming on sites like Twitch and then later, YouTube. This has now become, a lot of investment from professional sports teams, both in Europe and America. And we've also seen, this push towards, are there broadcast rights? The answer is no. But the venture capital was anticipating that the industry would grow significantly, that it would become basically a major sport. And we're finding out as we have been in esports winter, although there are signs of the spring coming for sure. But there was a big drawdown in the industry, particularly post the audience boom of COVID. So wanted to invite Roald here. So let's start with you. You were with Fnatic, first off. You were the general manager of Fnatic. And then you moved into working for FACEIT, which was a tournament operator and probably more importantly, an online platform.
Yeah. So at Fnatic, I actually started as a writer there for Call of Duty 4 back, I don't know, 2007.
That's where we met, right?
Probably, yeah. I mean, I think you were at Cadre at the time. So
correct. Yeah, that's the one.
So was there for a couple of years. I was editor-in-chief there, and then general manager for a couple of years, and looked after the Quake team, Counter-Strike team for a little bit, and then FACEIT came quite quickly after that through someone called Sturmy, which probably most of the viewers won't know. Was one of the most famous Quake players.
Probably the best Italian player ever in esports, to my knowledge, right?
Yeah, I'd say so. A very smart, commercially driven, smart, and I say that in a positive way. He knew how to sell himself. Very handsome guy, and he was one of the founders of FACEIT. So I knew him through Fnatic because he was on the Quake team there, and he basically asked me, "Do you want to have a chat with my co-founders and see if you're interested in this project?" And I think I was employee number 4 or something to join the team. So very, very early on. Back then, we were very focused on Quake. We started there really as a testing ground for the platform, but also, kind of to prove a point, I suppose. Sturmy came from Quake. Some of the founders came from Quake. I personally love Quake. And I think quite quickly we managed to prove there through competition and so on that actually we could, bring that game. It wasn't dead, but pretty close to it, back to life. So, obviously through that, we FACEIT adopted Counter-Strike, and this became the platform that everyone knew. Within FACEIT, most of my time there, I probably looked after our event side of things, specifically the players and the teams participating in the events, the tournament formats, and so on. That I'm not complaining about. I designed a ton of them. Hindsight 2020. But it did give me an insight in kind of what went wrong, and also the things that FACEIT did do right. I think a lot of people tend to ignore that. A lot of the things that FACEIT did made a lot of sense if you knew what was going on. So
also, FACEIT, to be clear, as it grew, your primary business was as an online competitive platform for amateur players, for Counter-Strike primarily. And this was I would say the primary pipeline for surfacing pro players, right? So I think a lot of the opinions that all of us probably share about the past and future of the esports industry is based off of the success of FACEIT as a platform, as an engine for community play that then feeds through several layers into professional play. And that the concept of esports really starts as a grassroots phenomenon. And when it has been imposed in a top-down way, which we have seen many times, probably most dramatically with Overwatch League, but in many other circumstances as well, when it has been imposed as a top-down structure of here's the pro scene without building up the grassroots, it becomes very top-heavy, and the thing ultimately kind of fails. Like, you can't start something that way.
Put it this way, I actually think it's one of the things that some other games like League of Legends clearly lack, because actually, if you look at like European League of Legends, for example, it wasn't really until they put the ERL system, which is like a tiered ecosystem in between pro and amateur, that I think you actually got development. Because basically, I can tell you, I've been playing on my stream for like a month now, some CS2, and it is even way worse than I even remember. Like, matchmaking is actually, even Premier is unplayable, because first of all, you're in Europe, so you get dropped into a game with like a guy speaking Russian, a German person, someone who's just looks like they've never used a keyboard before, and then a guy who's just fucking screaming on the mic all the time. And you're supposed to play a full professional game doing so. Whereas if you go and face it, no matter what people might think about the platform, it's people who are serious about trying to play competitively, and they understand basic competitive concepts and like what the roles are, etc. And so no matter what, again, you can argue with people and you might not make the right call in a game, but at least they are trying to play the game. Sometimes when you go into matchmaking, I just think, like, how could you, like, Valve doesn't know what pro play is. They would never get from this to pro play. You could never, the leap would be impossible. And if I'm already in public servers in matchmaking, how do I ever get from there to a team? Like, there's not even a mechanism. There's not even a website built in. There's nothing. So I actually think people do underestimate that if you want to build up an ecosystem, like, we only in esports do the top down, and we basically stop at like I wouldn't even say semi-pro level. We just stop at like the tier 3 pro level, maybe tier 2, depending on how generous I want to be. There's a massive chasm between that and the person who's just trying to be amateur to semi-pro, which is where you get all the talent come from. Also, the reason this will be a good episode in theory is, one, right now, Roald isn't in a position like FACEIT, so he can speak more openly. And he's Dutch. And I can tell you, as someone who lives in the Netherlands, it's my adoptive country. Thank you very much for allowing me to live here. Everyone who's Dutch, etc. I can tell you, I actually remember back in the day on ESRL, he's one of the people I thought, how rude, he's just flamed me. I don't even know this guy. I actually didn't know what Dutch people are like. The beauty of Dutch people, I can tell you, everyone in Liverpool's found this out about Arnie Slot, is if you ever wanted unfiltered feedback about everything that person does or doesn't like about you and anything else in the world, unprompted, they're the best people in the world to come to. They've got it on deck all day long. And the best part is they're not even trying to be offensive, much like me. They're just being themselves.
I've lived in the UK for about 12 years now, so I think I've softened up a little bit.
Okay,
but you know, I tend to think that I found a happy medium, I suppose, between the two, because, you know, Dutch can go a bit far.
Well, as they say, the middle way is the best way, Roald.
There you go.
That's true.
No, but you know, I think just to go back onto FACEIT, and I think the one thing that they did really well, and you know, I can give credit to Nicolo, the CEO, who's still obviously at EFG now. What he understood very clearly, very early, was that where esports served its purpose for FACEIT was kind of the aspiration for players. So a player doesn't just play something. Well, I mean, you do, but people invest much more time than, you know, versus being just entertained if they have something to aspire to, right? That can be a skin, for example. That can be, you know, certain coins, but that can also be a layer like esports, like I can play with Simple, or I can become a pro player, you know, and I can get cash prize. And thinking back to me as a 12-year-old playing Call of Duty 1, that was what I was playing for, you know.
When I was playing Warcraft 3 as a teenager, that's what I was playing for, right? You know, I was never pro, but I was competing against pros in certain lands, right?
It's why, I mean, Counter-Strike definitely has suffered quite a bit under the, you know, recent years of, like, you know, not having the concept of a pub server where it's a little community, a little hub of people that all play with each other, and you just want to be the top of the scoreboard. You want to be the guy that's, you know, top, that recognized as the best within your community. That used to be the first step before you even went onto a platform like ESEA or, you know, eventually FACEIT. And so ultimately, I think it is sad to kind of watch what's happened to, you know, the chain of progress has essentially been severed without these companies and without these communities, and people aren't really addressing it. I think basically now, and the sad reality is the Counter-Strike community is kind of all formed on around skins. You know, like people see it as a vector for making money or having big inventories. I wonder if we took skins away, how many people would still play Counter-Strike? That's always the big question, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to an extent, because I remember, like, you know, the early days when we were doing tournaments in CSGO, you know, without CSGO Lounge at the time.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, you wouldn't have as nearly as many viewers, right? So I think it is kind of ingrained with Counter-Strike, and you guys, well, Richard and Thorin, you guys are British. You know how ingrained betting is in kind of that culture. So and obviously there's plenty of downsides to it as well. So it's a very tricky subject, whether it's positive or negative, or what the impact of it is. The reality is it's there, and it's just about how you deal with it. But people just wish it away, or just try to make a lot of money from it, rather than see like, okay, how do we properly deal with this, with the knowledge that it's here, because otherwise the industry would probably not exist, or a large portion of it. So,
well, it would definitely be unsustainable without betting money, and now, thankfully, prediction market money. Without that, again, we're not sat here talking to each other about we're all out of esports probably years ago. The whole thing would have pancaked in on itself. So, and it's another reason why I don't understand why so many of our own fans like to LARP as being anti-betting, like, or anti-gambling mechanics. It's like Counter-Strike's pretty much founded on that. Like, I don't know, guys.
Even the game itself with case opening, guys.
That's what I'm saying. Like, they're probably going to win that lawsuit in New York, and good. I mean, like, but they've made changes. They've made fundamental changes to the way it operates. But again, like, we don't get from, like, bring your own computer tournaments to filling out arenas without gambling. Like, it physically couldn't have happened. So it's another thing that I think, like, the fans take a lot for granted, that just how much of this industry needs to be underwritten and who is willing to underwrite it is a very small circle of businesses.
Yes. And this is, it's not that obviously betting isn't in sports, but it is going to be an integral part of esports, because there are no other revenue streams, guys. Like, the fans don't pay, as we've been over a million times before. Pay-per-view is gone. There are no media rights. So this is the world that we live in. And, it's the only thing that's going to continue to finance esports going forward. But, outside of the developers, and the developers live and die by the popularity of their games. And certainly, we can say very confidently that clearly companies like Riot have found that it is net profitable to operate esports, especially with the popularity of their game, because it serves, I would imagine, we can never know for sure because nobody says this, but I'd imagine it primarily serves as something that keeps people playing the game and therefore spending money, right? It's not going to get anybody in the door, probably, but once you're there, once they can get you invested in the esport, then you're going to play the game more. You're going to play it for more in total time, more time in terms of years of play, and you're probably going to spend more money as a result of that.
And you're going to watch it more.
Yeah. And you're going to watch it more, which also makes them money. So, there's all these different factors. But as we've also seen with League of Legends, one of the major problems, so today, an announcement that came out from ES Charts is that LCS, the North American League for League of Legends, hit an all-time low viewership this spring. And it has been going down and down and down and down and down ever since the pandemic ended. And it looked like maybe the lock-in tournament earlier this year would be the lowest, but no, they've hit a new low. Now, part of that, I'm not going to, there are caveats. Part of that was that it was a 3-0 finals, and I think it actually probably would have surpassed the peak viewership. But what's most concerning is the average viewership is significantly lower, right? So I think they wouldn't, but the result is they both hit, due to the shortness of the duration of the finals. They hit a all-time low peak viewership and an all-time low average concurrent viewership. And there is no saving esports if nobody plays the game. And the single biggest problem with the LCS is that people in North America no longer play League of Legends. It was a huge game among high school and college age people in 2009 to 2015 in North America. There are campuses where I know people who are in college. I was too old for this, right? I started playing after college, but just after college. Like, it came out the year I graduated college. And I know people who are in college in these kind of early 2010s where that's what everybody was doing on these campuses. And I've said this before on the show, but when I was doing some consulting for Play Versus, which is a scholastic esports organization in North America, and I was going to high schools in Colorado. I went to a high school that has 3,000 students, and they could not get 5 players together of any skill level, even bronze, to play on a team for a high school of 3,000 students. It just isn't popular anymore. There is no community of gamers. The people who are playing League are primarily people who are now in their 30s, in their 40s, like us, right?
Which is why it's hilarious simultaneously that you get stories. It was literally the last week where they find an LEC player for saying fuck in an interview as if it's a game for 10-year-olds. Like, the disconnect is crazy.
I do think probably there are younger people playing it in Europe, obviously, because of Carmine Corp and, the big orgs out there. But it's still, even in Europe, you're right, primarily an older demographic. But the real collapse hasn't been with the LEC player base. It's been with the North American player base. And this is why LEC still has better esports numbers. There are fewer young Korean people than there used to be that play League of Legends, but there's still some level of pipeline, although I have heard personally from the Korean teams that they are concerned about their pro talent pipeline because fewer young people are playing the game. So they don't have as many upcoming teenagers to train through their youth and academy programs. But this is all to say that when we talk about the grassroots nature of esports, the collapse in pro viewership is always going to be directly tied to the active player base of the game. And the way to refresh that is obviously to get younger people involved, because as you get older, unfortunately, you just play less video games. You have kids. You have career obligations. Your parents are getting older. You have different interests. There are all these different things that attack your time. And so you need this community grassroots in order to foster a healthy esports scene. Because remember that only a very, very small percentage, 1% of players will watch esports.
Yeah, I think, you touch upon a really good point there. And I think we often forget in esports is, we look so much towards sport that we forget we're actually part of a much larger industry that's gaming. It's the largest entertainment industry there is. And I think we keep an eye on the ball of what's happening in sports very well. But what's actually happening within gaming, we tend to forget in the greater gaming industry, right? Because gaming itself has a lot of issues at the moment. Since COVID, it's been, more money's been spent than ever, but every single game developer is in trouble, partly because of overhiring, but also partly because they struggle to maintain players. And I think, Monty, you touched upon the issue is, most of the players who play those esports titles, they tend to be older, and we have less and less time to play these games. I barely have time to watch any esports tournament, even though I'd love to, but my weekends are just packed with kid stuff and family stuff. And the younger generation, they're playing Roblox, Minecraft, Fortnite, and they churn these games. They play a different Fortnite game every single week with their friends. They play some co-op. So I think we more need to start to think, how do we reach that audience and how do we engage that audience? And to an extent, esports might even need to do the job of the game developers themselves because they're not doing it. But, but that will tackle a lot of the issues because I try not to go too much off track here, but, a lot of esports teams, I feel like what they're saying is, publishers, please give us more, right? But you no one gets stuff given. You build leverage, and then you get more, right? You use that leverage to get more. And esports teams have barely leverage because, well, first of all, they're not bonding together, and second of all, they're not really contributing much. So, this is where a place where esports teams could look to do much more is how do you get those Roblox players to become your fans, and then you build a bigger audience, and then you can go to, I don't know, right, and say actually, look, we have all this audience of 16-year-olds. We can drive them to League if you want to, but give us more money.
Yes. And I think it's clear from the team side that a lot of teams have realized they're just not going to get more money from the developers. or the publishers. It's not going to happen. And I think a lot of teams are now looking at different strategies. Like we had Arnold Hur, the CEO of Gen G, and Gen G, one of Gen G's major businesses right now, is running coaching and youth academies in Korea, right? Like they are creating structures. And I think, as somebody who is a parent, I would probably pay money if my kid was interested in gaming to have a more structured environment, like I would pay for a sports club, right, for the kids, so they can compete in a structured environment, learn teamwork, learn these skills. And to me, that's a valuable business, but it is these businesses that drive fandom, because unlike traditional sports, so traditional sports, I've never played a game of organized American football in my entire life. I was never part of a football team. I've obviously, played with friends and casually, but I'm a huge NFL fan, right? Because there are many people like me in America who love the NFL or love a sport, even though they never played competitively in it themselves. However, I think there are very few people who love an esport without being active players in that esport, right? Because when you stop being active, you also tend to stop, doing the esport, where that's not true of traditional sports. Although Counter-Strike may be a little bit of an edge case there, because people tend to watch even after they've given up the game. But League of Legends, if you give it up for 2 years, is incomprehensible because of the number of patches and champions and everything else that changes, right? Counter-Strike is more eternal, which is why Counter-Strike is such a great esport, right? But in any case, the point I'm making is that it's very hard. You have to have an active player base to do this, unlike traditional sports. And there's no real way to convince people to watch the esports if they haven't played the game. It's so difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I think also a big difference, obviously, is, an American football or Europe, football or soccer, they're incredibly culturally ingrained, right? They go into class warfare within the UK, right? You cheer for, someone who's from a lower class will not cheer for Chelsea or Fulham, right? It's very unlikely, So it's so culturally ingrained that, you don't necessarily need that element because your dad used to watch, or, your brother's watching. So, it's uncomparable, and you can't expect esports to do that at this time either. And maybe Counter-Strike does it better because Counter-Strike has, nearly 30 years of heritage to pull that from, and father and son, or mother and daughter or whatever might have watched matches together.
Yeah.
So those things do take time, I think, before they can build, and I don't know if esports ever will reach that, obviously, because it's completely different kettle of fish compared to something like football. But those kind of things where the participation layer is not needed, that takes many years in cultural building. And again, that's the step that we tend to skip with esports, right? That kind of cultural building that happens to really build a sustained fan base that doesn't need to play the game in and out every single day in order to watch it. So.
Yeah, I mean,
even think that's actually an area that you can even do a whole episode on, because I actually think you could even narrow this primarily to North America, because I keep noticing, because I work in multiple games, a lot of people obviously have the myopic view of they're only in league, so they can only see league in the world. I always tell people, it's the same in both in Counter-Strike and League. They all tell me all the same shit. It's like there's no up-and-coming players, and besides, who do we practice against? And no one plays properly when they play in a scrim or in main. It's like, one, those are cultural issues, mate. If they're happening constantly throughout every game, there's no evil guy making you do that. That's just who you are as a people. You're not serious unless you have, I assume, a whole school structure with the coaches on your ass, and then the NCAA. Apparently, Americans just need structure imposed over them. And then also, one of the reason why it's such a whack excuse is this. All the fucking money's still in your region. Yep. You not only have all the giant sponsors, all the fucking streaming platforms are from your country. Most of the games were invented in your country. And are you ready for the actual most ridiculous one? All the biggest dogs are still there. The joke in Counter-Strike is, miss me with the idea that there's no money in North American Counter-Strike. Well, then what the fuck are FaZe Clan, 100 Thieves, and all these teams doing? Oh, they just don't bother signing teams from their region. Well, that's not my fault. I didn't make you do that, mate. You're not a patriot or something. So I think one of the weirdest things of all is we have this massive industry in North America. We have loads of money coming in from outside, people who want to be involved in esports. But in North America, and I think you can draw this to a bigger point that you guys are making here, another mistake the esports industry did is it took for granted that it would be served up a fresh crop of players every year. Whereas actually what we've now found is the modern games that are really popular with kids don't have a giant esports tournament side to it, depending on what year we're talking about. We're talking about things like Roblox, Apex Legends, now it's extraction shooters.
Yep.
The problem these games have is the Fortnite problem, which is it doesn't matter how big that game gets as a player base, if it doesn't have a serious way for the esports industry to connect into it and for people to start watching it as an esport, it becomes almost wasted calories at that point in time. Because, yeah, you get crazy numbers of people loved Fortnite, but did Fortnite ever get the same prestigious circuit as League of Legends, for example, or even Counter-Strike? No. So another problem we also have is the era of even watching esports as a competitive discipline feels like it's aged out a bit from what the youth is, and there's a disconnect there. So I actually do think it's one of those ones, sad to say, where in hindsight, yeah, if you go back in time machine now, 10 years, one of the things you do 10 years ago, start setting up almost youth clubs at schools that play League of Legends and Counter-Strike and little intra-regional competitions. You'd be putting money into that, and then you'd do the whole ecosystem thing, whereas we all took for granted there'll always be this pipeline of unlimited players, and then we just sit there at the end of the pipeline and make it into an industry and sell it and monetize it, where it turns out it's not that easy, rather.
I mean, the death of it in NA is essentially it's just reverted back to what esports was born out of, which is competitive gaming. There's a distinction between the two. Not a lot of people really think about it all that much because, it's a bit wanky and pretentious, but competitive gaming is ultimately just competing, on a leaderboard, a ladder, something you can do a bit more casually. Like, for instance, it always blows my mind that all the NA Call of Duty streamers, they don't want skill-based matchmaking. They want to dunk on shitters all day.
Holy shit, right?
They don't want that. Every time that's been implemented, they complain and say, I don't want to have to play in sweaty lobbies. People want the competitive aspect, but not the esports aspect. The esports aspect is you got to get sweaty, you got to work hard, you got to be practicing every day. And particularly in Counter-Strike in NA, whenever there's not been money there, no one wants to try hard, no one wants to play, no one wants to treat it like a 9 to 5 for no fucking reward whatsoever except the vague prospect of prize money. And that's been a constant in NA. They've had these, peaks and valleys where people have been working really hard to get to a place where they can make money. It piques everybody's interest. They get signed by a big org. They make lots of money. It creates an aspirational element that rolls down hills. Other people want to copy that. Unfortunately, where we're at right now, esports is dead in NA across the board. Like, as far as I can tell, there's no upside to even trying to develop talent. I mean, I think to myself, maybe Call of Duty, but then CDL's been struggling. So I think ultimately the thing that I hate about where esports has gone as a collective is you've got European thinkers and European orgs and European-based entities. We're constantly bailing out the Americans. Like, so much of what's happened in modern esports is about, can we resurrect NA? I'm fucking sick of trying. Can we just let it die? Like, there are other better regions to be focused on right now. I know you don't want to hear it. Russia is one of them, right? Whatever. We'll just have to pretend that's not fucking real. We have to pretend that all the best players coming out in esports, all the best teenagers aren't Russian. We just got to ignore that's a reality and put little white flags next to their name, which is just retarded after 4 years or whatever it's fucking been. But
timing also couldn't be worse on that war in that sense.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous,
right? So let's just ignore Russia then. Fine. China is the single biggest market for gaming and esports in the world, and yet we treat it like it's some opaque, mystical, faraway land, when in reality we should be building bridges and reparations and connecting with those fans and helping them connect with us, breaking down the linguistic barriers, creating content, sharing information as much as you can, right? And that's but we're not doing that. Instead, we go, man, it sucks that NA is dead. Why don't we throw a bunch of money into NA and watch it fucking evaporate again for the millionth time? Watch those cretins that run those orgs fucking spend money on shit, and then when it doesn't come in, the lottery numbers don't come in, they withdraw from the game again and say, but maybe we'll be back one day. Yeah, when the handouts are there. We know when you come back. Like fuck those people. They're as responsible for the death of any as anything else, and yet we constantly are seduced by them. Like, oh, maybe this time, maybe this time. And they're all
I do love the
bunch
way,
of Todd
even though
Howards,
these people are in like every big esport there is, every single interview they do, the headline's always like, I might get back into CS, if the conditions are right, which is again like, mate, methinks the lady doth possess too much. Don't worry about CS. Apparently it's not an industry you can make any money in. You just enjoy Valorant and all those games that are completely
but here's the thing.
going nowhere and you can't get any bigger.
Here's the thing with that, Duncan, right? Like, I wouldn't even mind so much, but it's like right. Something new happens, like the Overwatch League. You come out, you tell us it's all the next big thing, and it's unlocking unprecedented marketing potential that we've never seen before in the space. Then it dies on its ass, and you tell us it was all a con job and it was a load of bullshit from the start. You've done this with Overwatch, you've done this with Valorant, you've done this with Call of Duty, you've done this with League of Legends, back and forth. What are we doing? Like you're right. Your lies that you tell, Mr. American org owner, color the perception of the industry to a point where, like, people might look and go, wow, that's really healthy. That must be doing really fucking well if TSM has a Forbes valuation of $500 million, which it would never be worth in a million fucking years. No esports org would that, it would never be a good asset to acquire at that price. None of them. Not the biggest, not the best, the most winningest, whatever metric you want to use. And people look in the industry and go, yeah, I might get into that. And they do, and they come along and they spend some money. And then they get fucking burned and they go away forever and they tell all of their business people they're a bunch of grifters in esports, stay well away. And that's what has triggered every kind of like esports bubble to pop. It's just the lies and the greed and the massaging of numbers. It's a tale as old as time. Now, for Roald's, this is where I'll tee Roald up, right? What I like about what Roald has been saying on Twitter recently, for I have indeed read his tweets, he's absolutely right in what he says, that one of the bigger problems we've got is esports is not sports. And when you try and overlay the sports financing model onto esports, it fundamentally breaks itself and esports irreparably. And so that's where I think we can go to now, because I think ultimately I agree with this principle. I think that we needed to be more like sports from a broadcast perspective, but not from a funding perspective.
Yeah, that's obviously a massive issue. And I think, like we said before, sports got to a certain place over many decades of cultural work, but also natural growth. It was a natural place for it to go because that's where the funding was for sports in certain ways. Obviously we talk about sports in a very broad sense, but NBA there itself is already niche. NBA is completely different to Premier League, and Premier League is already different to Champions League, right?
Yeah.
So all these things are already fundamentally different in themselves, and they've all found their own way through years of evolution. And I think esports has just come along and said, like, that looks good. They make a lot of money. Let's just copy that. And yes, they might make a lot of money, but they make a lot of money because they found a format, cultural heritage and so on that suits them. And I think the Premier League is always one of the most prime examples. The British or the English football league is they. A lot of people don't realize it only started in the 90s.
Yeah.
It's not that old. Before that, football was, culturally so deep. That didn't start with the Premier League. It was already there. It existed, but it had a lot of the issues that esports had. It was very corrupt. Many players didn't get paid. Teams went bankrupt all the time. Rules were not followed. Whether sporting rules or regulatory rules. But there was this layer of people, millions and millions and millions of people who deeply cared about it.
Yeah.
And only then could the Premier League come to existence, because they took pain points away that was ruining the sport for a lot of people. They could come to the clubs and the players and so on and say, like, actually, we'll start making you money. And only then it was ready. TV broadcasting, accessibility and so on, make the sport better for everyone. So, it found its way through that. But again, esports was just like, oh, Premier League looks good. Let's skip all that, 200 years of what went before that and just start with that part. And that's where it simply is fundamentally broken. And our most of the audience that is in esports, again, like we said before, is either on the older side, who doesn't have the time to consume anymore, and who that model might work with to a certain extent. Or you got a younger audience who's not used to pay for anything, who spends 30 seconds watching clips. Don't go out that often, possibly. Play completely different games, but we're still trying to put this model in front of them. How can you expect them to watch a best of 5 Counter-Strike match that takes 5 hours or 3 hours or whatever, right? It's just not going to happen for this audience. So you keep building for this audience that is going away, and you're just completely ignoring this new audience that might be interested, but you need to adjust, and you need to change, and you need to speak their language and so on. So, that is just a fundamental misalignment where, that commercialization of esports that, is important, but it just needs to happen in the right way. And again, that's just a step that's completely skipped. And I think that was there at some point. It's just completely forgotten.
The future may be looking a little bit brighter in esports, but if you want job security, well, let me tell you, the esports industry is not for you. However, if you want some great online security, that's where ExpressVPN comes in. I was just traveling internationally, which meant I was on a million airport Wi-Fi networks, and I always make sure that I am on ExpressVPN whenever I'm on public Wi-Fi, just to make sure my data isn't stolen. It's super easy to use on your phone. All you do is get the app, and it's just one button you push, and it just runs in the background. I never even notice this thing's on. It's so fast. Furthermore, if you like following myself, Thorin, and Richard on our movie podcast, Foreplay, it can be very useful for you because as I'm sure you're aware, Netflix has different titles in different countries. And so if you look up online what our film that week is and you see, hey, it's on Netflix in the UK, well, you can flip over ExpressVPN to the UK and watch that title with a subscription you're already paying for instead of paying more money to get it locally. So remember, you're already paying for it, so why not just use ExpressVPN? It's only $3.49 a month. It's its lowest price ever, which comes out to only 12 cents a day. You could use it on as many devices you want, your laptop, your desktop, your tablet. You can even install it directly onto some routers to encrypt your whole network if you want. So it's extremely easy to use and really, really helpful. Select plans for U.S. customers also include the Identity Defender, which is a new suite of tools to get your data removed from data brokers, alert when you get your data appears on the dark web, and even insure you against data theft for up to $1 million. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by top tech reviewers like CNET and The Verge. So you can protect your online privacy today by visiting expressvpn.com/horsemen. That's horsemen, plural, HORSEMEN. That's expressvpn.com/horsemen to find out how you can get up to 4 extra months. expressvpn.com/horsemen. And thank you very much for supporting our sponsors. It's a great way to support us here on the show. Well, let's talk about how, right now it feels like we're rolling back the clock a little bit, because one thing that has been very successful, particularly in these places that the esports viewership is declining, like America, has been Dreamhack, right? The Dreamhack events where people can come and play and, engage in the games themselves while simultaneously having the opportunity to see esports have drawn tens of thousands of participants.
Yeah.
And Evo obviously continues to be very popular. Fighting game tournaments are now rolling out. There's more Evos around the world that are going to be happening moving forward because there is a grassroots element to this. And before streaming was a huge thing, the big events were MLGs, they were dream hacks. These were primarily events where, you could go and see the professional teams. But, you're buying a weekend pass and you're not going to sit in a seat, most people, watching esports for the entire weekend. Either, in the days of StarCraft, you are participating in an open tournament in order to have the chance to play against the pros on the big stage, right? Like the pros were obviously seeded later in the tournaments, which is one of the primary problems with the FGC right now, is that they don't seed the actual professional players into the later stages, which I know you guys like that if you're part of the FGC, but it's not good for the teams, it's not good for the players, and it's not good for the sponsors or money in your scene, which I personally care about, even if you don't. But, this was the opportunity where you could have the dream, or when you're not playing, you could walk over to the esports stage and there was League of Legends. And it was a destination because primarily this was a community, guys, right? You liked professional League of Legends. You liked professional Counter-Strike. You liked professional Call of Duty. You liked professional StarCraft. Because when the event came to the city near you, or even not near you, you could drive 8 hours if you were in America, right? You would go with your friends where you could do something the whole weekend. You could play the games, and then you were able to meet other people who were passionate about it, and you could all cheer for the pro teams on stage together. And as obviously streaming was great for esports in many ways, but as it became easier and easier to broadcast on the internet, obviously there was a huge additional number of people that could be reached as a result of this. But because those numbers dwarfed the events, even if you got sometimes 30,000, 40,000, these are not crazy numbers of people to a convention center in an American city over a weekend, it pales in comparison to the millions you have watching a Counter-Strike or a League of Legends finals, right? And so a lot of the emphasis started going on this, but a lot of these people who were watching these were minted slowly over time by going to the events. And I think all of us who are all super OG esports people, I got into esports because of LANs and because I could compete in Warcraft 3 at a LAN. And then I got introduced to the professional scene that way. And it became aspirational, or it became, I think what's more important is I was part of the esports community, right?
Yeah.
There wasn't this like hard separation between me and pro players. It was accessible.
Yeah, I think, a large part comes down to just participation, right? We want to participate in something. We want to feel that we belong to something, right? And I think, again, this is why esports and gaming has this unique opportunity, because it does give something for people to belong to, where they're not finding on the outside world anymore. So, but we're not catering to it. We're just ignoring it. Or hopefully it's returning to it. Like you said, Monty, Dreamhack is doing a great job with it. Evo has been doing a great job with it for years, and Evo is a great example of something that's culturally built up from the ground and managed to make that monetizable. And once you participate in something, you're more than happy to spend money on it. You spend money on league skins because you're participating in it. You're happy to spend, I don't know how much Evo tickets are, but I think they're like $100 plus. You're more than happy to spend that kind of money on it when you're actually participating. You have a couple of things to do. You can, go to the cosplay. You can, do workshops. You can watch the pros play. You can play yourself. You can, talk to the game devs. So it gives you so much more, and it becomes really a festival of your game and your scene, rather than, this is just another esports competition where I sit and watch. I have to pay crazy amount of money to just get a drink. And then, people don't want to spend more than $50 for it. Makes complete sense to me. And, I think also last point on it is there's, I feel like there's a sense of that authenticity is lost, right? Everyone is now cosplaying like, they're some TV movie star, for me, the suits on broadcast, at least, on Twitch, never made sense to me, because it's like, a 16-year-old is watching. Who are you trying to impress? They're much more, they feel much more connected to a guy in a t-shirt or a hoodie of their favorite team or whatever than some guy in a suit who feels super distant to them. The players not being allowed to swear at each other, right? My favorite memories of Quake players was them sitting across each other and nearly punching each other in the face because they got so heated, right? But those are the moments that become memorable. Those build real rivalries. Those build amazing moments of content, and it gives you a real authentic view into what's really happening with these people and in this industry. And obviously we shouldn't be fighting each other, but a bit of swearing at each other, who cares?
No, I mean, what you're basically talking about there, which is definitely something the esports industry was guilty of, is because it attempted to ape like professional sports and television media in general, it took on certain conceits and rules that never needed to exist. And in fact, the ones you're referring to, the stupid thing they've done there is try to pretend we're a different culture, whereas we already had youth culture in a way that actually those platforms all want now and want to bring elements of that in. Like, I always make this point. I just think of some of the people, I won't say who, there was even some famous pros who used to actually go to people like ESL and Dreamhack, who are pro players in CS, and complain about me and Richard making jokes. And then I turn on TV, and even the bloody Yanks have, like, basically a Dreamhack 2015 CS desk is what CBS Go Lazio is.
Yeah.
Isn't the best part of the whole show Micah Richards doing zero analysis and just laughing while talking about the fact he's fat? Like, I think I did that joke about 10 years ago already. Like, but what's mad is we were told that by doing this, we were killing esports and that we didn't understand we were going to hold it back from being a giant thing. By the way,
This
the obvious
is why
punchline being,
esports
when on
will
television,
never be a
I
thing.
actually told Shaq on television on America he was fat. Actually, people from Turner told us that's brilliant. I hope we have more of that on the esports broadcast. So as usual, the esports industry had it ass backwards. They got for the horse.
I mean, it's to this day, it's probably one of the most iconic broadcast esports moment to ever exist, and that was because it was unfiltered, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If you would have said, oh, Shaq, you look so shiny in your nice suit, no one would have cared.
And by the way, if it wasn't for the fact they already had a bit of that on their broadcast, I never would have done it, Roald. I'd never go on a fucking live broadcast as someone who's from a different space and make like a rude comment. I did that because that was the ambience of what their show was, that you could poke fun at each other. It was almost like Top Gear vibes, wasn't it?
And also as well, I mean, like, we knew from just when Turner were doing the pre-E-League introduction, they were like dropping crumbs that they were going to get into the esports space on mainstream sports broadcasts. Whenever it was brought up, the sports guys were like a little bit sneering, like sports has always looked down on esports. I mean, that's fair enough,
Yeah.
And so when we did that show, like, we thought it was just important to just fucking hold our corner, and that was, we knew they were going to give us a little bit of shit, and we knew it was important we give them a little bit of shit back. And that was the attitude we went in there. Like, we belong here. This is real. But yeah, I mean, to the broader point, it still blows my mind that, we're in suits and ties and we're trying to attract this younger audience. We're taking ourselves way too seriously. I don't want to go to the point that League of Legends has gone to, where their desk is now just fan service slop. Yeah, because I mean, it hasn't.
It's
helped.
really terrible now.
It hasn't helped with the viewership. So I don't think I don't think there's a metric you can use to justify the move.
No.
But I definitely think we could I mean, like, my approach whenever I'm running a desk these days, because I'm back to doing it, is like, what would make somebody of any age stick around, and like, how can you create potentially viral moments via the mechanism of discussion?
Put it this way, one thing I've seen, I know you've even referenced this, but I can see when you do the broadcast. So I actually think for PGL, you and Tech Girl, the perfect hire, because you're very aligned on this, is one thing that people are bored of in CS, for example, is that, again, we're pretending to be sports every single post game for every group stage game. We have to do like a breakdown like it was the World Cup final or something, mate. But the problem is some games don't warrant that. Some games weren't even good to watch.
Yes.
So what Richard does instead, and Tech Girl does a bit of it too, is they almost treat it like, imagine instead of this being the post game desk, if this was just the first podcast that we did after the tournament, what would the big topic be? Wouldn't it be like, should this guy be caught? What was going on there? Wasn't that a big fail? Like, I think it's like, what does the community want to talk about, basically?
Yeah, there's no point in ignoring what the talking point is going to be on a show. I mean, like, that's insane. I mean, like, people lie to the audience all the time, or treat the audience like idiots all the time. If you just adopt the rule of thumb, like if you're a fan of the sport too, you know what a fan is going to be talking about. You know what a fan is going to be thinking. Well, if you're in a position to steer the conversation in that direction, why wouldn't you? And I mean, like, I also, though, I will say, Roald made another good point on Twitter, which is there isn't an esports fan.
No,
there
that's
isn't
another thing.
one
By the way, I
type.
tell people to this day, one of the worst things that I understand coming from Counter-Strike, I'm a hypocrite because I love having a tournament that takes a week and I don't have to wait 3 months like fucking League of Legends and then find out after like 8 weeks, oh, that team sucked dick in the playoffs the whole time. I was just wasting my time thinking they'd be good. I find that out 3 days later in Counter-Strike. That's one of the best things. But one of the flaws is when you bring up the thing about the tickets, is the first thing I always think of, right? If I go to see Taylor Swift, I don't go and Taylor Swift's playing fifth and I first have to watch fucking a tribute act to someone that's she's just on, bro. I went to see her. That the analogy here would be I'm just buying a ticket because I'm a pop fan and I have to even hope Taylor Swift plays on day 3 and this and like, what even is that? And also every broadcast, League of Legends can never ever talk about how esports has done it. It's done it the exact opposite way. Their dream always in the LCS was that you sit down on the first game, watch 8 games in a row of totally different teams, and at the end go, brilliant, because I'm just a fan of League of Legends, where it's like, that's not how any sports fandom works. You're a fan of that team. Like, again, if I'm a Liverpool fan, why am I watching, like, Bournemouth play Brentford? I'm not watching it. Maybe I'll watch, like, Man United versus Man City because it's a big televised game, but even then I'm probably not. I'm probably just watching the Liverpool game. So I also think for as much as we say we copy and spot, he's done a shit job of doing it. You haven't even identified the mechanisms.
No, exactly. And I mean, you know, there's a very small number of people who might consider themselves esports fans. You know, I'm sure there'll be a few. But I mean, you know, probably the bigger issue then, if you start breaking it down, how many people are actually left? You know, and if you know, if you're a team and you need to sell sponsorship and you know, you're active in 3 games, you can only say like, actually with these 3 games, you can only reach 50 million people. You know, you're probably screwed. So, you know, it's a difficult issue because they are so small. But you know, it's the truth. So you know, at some point, you know, you'll get found out, and people have gotten found out, right? The fake numbers and so on. You know, we've fallen in the trap so many times. So now, you know, isn't it time to say like, okay, we accept that these things are maybe smaller, and we play into it, right? A niche can be extremely cool. You know, so play into that. You know, I even think like in the VC space now, niches are the cool thing to invest in, right? So why don't we go like, okay, this is our niche. We focus on that and we brand our esports team around that. We conquer that completely. So I'd rather have 10 million fans in a small niche than have like half fans, 50 million, you know, half fans who are also fan of 3 other esports teams. And when it comes to it, they won't buy your jersey, right? So it's like, you know, go all out on that and speak to your fan in that direction with, you know, again, taking teams as an example here because it's the same with TOs. Speak to them, build your brand around that, you know, build your language around that, build, you know, the games that resonate with, you know, if you're interested in Southeast Asia, you know, maybe doing Call of Duty does not make sense. But that's often what people try and do. Like, okay, we do Call of Duty for the globe. But you know, go do Mobile Legends Bang Bang if you go to Indonesia, right? And if you're an esports team, build an entire brand around that. So I think that's still where, you know, there is, you know, obviously some stuff happening with teams picking up orgs from or creating these partnership orgs or with these orgs in different regions, but you know, I think still is a massive opportunity to say like, you know, I don't know, let's take Cloud9 as an example. You build a specific Cloud9 for Southeast Asia that's completely branded for them, holds the teams that are interested for that region. You only tweet in that language that they speak. You know, maybe you call it something completely different. You know, you do the same for Europe. You do the same for the US. You know, you focus on Call of Duty or whatever it resonates, fighting games or something. And you know, then you actually can speak to your audience. You build your niche. You can then get specific sponsors for that. And you know, actually show that you have hardcore fandom and probably monetize much better.
Yeah, I mean, this is the other problem, though. You know, the American, it's the American marketing machine that ultimately prevents that from occurring because not. This might sound like I'm probably going to blow some people's minds here, right? Not all clicks are equal. And the American marketing machine has dictated that if you're an Indian audience, your click is worth 100th of an American click. It's as simple as that. That this is the nickels and dimes of what goes on behind the esports machine, and it's the same with Indonesian cliques and like whatever it might be. There are some countries in Eastern Europe. They believe that the most valuable clique is an American clique, and that's what you're going to get your CPM, all of that stuff on. That's what you're going to get your big sponsor books on. How many click-throughs of an American buyer or someone from a major European country, how many of those clicks can you deliver unto me so I can get my ROI? And so otherwise, I mean, I imagine we'd see a lot of orgs chancing getting into something like, Mobile Legends Bang Bang or PUBG Mobile, but they don't, because the audiences are in these places where it's almost impossible to generate a sponsorship that's worth the effort. And so, again, this supposedly global thing that we always talk about being, it's global, it's connected, it's online, it's digital. Yeah, but you won't go into certain marketplaces because of economic realities. It's also, why don't we know more about South Korea now, 25 years into esports? Kesper. So, we haven't broke the great Kesper wall yet. So ultimately, there's these financial realities that are dictated by Americans that prevent Americans going into other areas besides America. Once again, Americans are the problem, is my point.
Well, especially now that the American audience has dried up. So the question is, who are you doing it for?
Yeah.
But to your point, Roald, it's also true that the teams have done a very bad job of branding on the whole. Like, I think one of the core issues is that, okay, so you mentioned, we've mentioned obviously the localization of traditional sports is a huge driver because you feel a connection to the place. Again, it's part of a community. I may not have played, for a team locally, but I feel connections via that locality to my professional team. I have memories of going and watching their games, talking to other fans. My friends or my parents that I grew up with are fans. So this is something that, talking about the Broncos, the NFL team, to my friends who I grew up with in Colorado is just part of our relationship, right?
You could even argue, right, Monty, another function sports actually you serve, which we haven't ever tapped into in esports is, I can tell you, I personally got back into sports in order to reconnect with certain family members where it's the only thing I could message them about every week. Nothing else about our lives have any overlap. Yeah.
Yes. It's a key part of my relationship with my father. Right. And I wouldn't give it up. But the importance of community, like sports, realize that you may not be actually playing out there on the field, but the way you reproduce that community within esports is by having these grassroots events, or at least by having competitive structures. I mean, I remember this has been the great complaint about League of Legends is there's no way to fucking play fives with your friends because, when I was growing up, there were automated tournaments in BattleNet for Warcraft 3 that you could just join every day that I played with. And I was part of IRC groups, like IRC, programs IRC channels rather, where everybody would be messaging each other about like, hey, we're all joining, blah, 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 blah. Let's see, you're talking a little shit to other people from around the world who are playing in these tournaments. Nope. I guess automated tournaments that were around in fucking 2000 can't be done anymore for I don't know what reason. Right, but FACEIT at least had this.
Anymore. We lost the technology. It can't be built anymore.
FACEIT was running these tournaments every day, which I imagine. I think Counter-Strike is not as big as it is without FACEIT and ESEA. Like I just think
definitely not. Man.
No way. Right, but
that gives you a daily reason to log in. Your number, you have the elo, you play with people.
Well, you're playing with your friends too. Like you feel like you're growing. You're growing your skill together. It's fun. It's something to do. And so the community elements are really not there. And what the teams have done very badly is there isn't a community around the team. I mean, there's been some half-ass attempts of like, join our fan club, but just purely from a brand perspective, what the fuck is the difference between Team Liquid and Cloud9? What the fuck is the difference? There isn't, like, I can tell you right now, Richard's a fan of the Raiders. Regardless of whether, but regardless of whether they were in Oakland or Los Angeles or Vegas, the Raiders have an aura, and it's the bad boy, it's the rough edges. They have a brand that attracts people, even if they're not.
With a
from
franchise for criminals. With a franchise for criminal fans, because all our players are criminals. That's just say it out loud, Monty. That's what we are. Right?
But there's a kind of badass vibe to the Raiders, and they have the most badass vibe of any NFL team. Like, they have a brand.
Because crime is cool.
The esports teams, they had an opportunity. So let me explain this in different terms. In the 90s and 2000s, many people constructed their identities off of music. You were a metal fan that came with an aesthetic. You were a punk that came with an aesthetic. You like pop music that came with an aesthetic. You like country, fucking came with an aesthetic. You know what I mean? You were building this identity. Now, there was an opportunity, I think, for younger people, because music became destigmatized. Like, you would dress up as a punk because it shocked people and it showed that you were part of this community. Eventually, people just stopped giving a shit about that. Like, whatever, it's just music. Like, what I like punk too, whatever. I'm not going to dress like that. You know what I mean? But there was an opportunity, I think, in the early 2010s for teams to like actually create identities for young people. And nobody fucking did it, pretty much. Maybe you could argue TSM did it. Maybe you can argue.
Even they didn't, in a way, though, Monty. I'll give you an example. TSM, if we're being real, was just like obnoxious fans. They were like the Yankees or the Knicks fans of their era.
Sure.
And then also Reginald was just an asshole. But they never even leaned into that. Like, what's stupid I never understood was, remember, they even had Double Lift at one point in time. Lean into being the villain, intentionally do some Conor McGregor shit. They just were assholes. It just so happened as a part of their personality. But they didn't even build into that. I always thought they should have built themselves like the evil empire and done that whole thing.
But my point is like the teams themselves, if you want to create a community, you have to have an identity or a community vibe. And like, can anybody tell me what an esports team community vibe is? Well, like, I'm not aware. Maybe FaZe.
I got a theory on this. I mean, it's it's the developers, isn't it? You see, the problem is, right, the things you're talking about with, like, punk comes with an aesthetic or metal comes with an aesthetic. Now, I've been on both sides of that particular aisle, right? Yeah, so you grow your hair out long, you wear torn clothes, you practice.
Put some patches on your hoodie.
Yeah, exactly. You practice your death stare, and looking cool with a cigarette drooping out your mouth in the mirror. Done that, been there, done that, right? And what happened, when the reason that you consider that to be important is because society, the man, tells you don't do it. So you go, fuck you, the man, I'm doing it anyway. And that's why it feels really good, particularly to teenagers, young adults going through your rebellious phase. You're developing your core values and morals, your brain's coming online. So obviously that's really, really important and really powerful. And generally what you identified with then, you will identify with on some level for life. Like, I don't dress that way or have my hair that way anymore, but I do still listen to the records and I do still have the t-shirts, you know what I mean? And I do still have the sensibilities. Now, here's the problem esports had. There was definitely a point they were doing that. And by the way, some of the legacy brands, as Roald can attest to, they were just fucking unbelievably strong brands. They would have stood up in the real world of marketing. Fnatic is an exceptional brand. It just is. Name,
EG in North America had a vibe back in the day.
Exactly, dude. Like, these brands spoke to you on some level. The color scheme, the name, the type of player they recruited. It was all very...
By the way, this is why people who are OGs responded so powerfully to EG's rebranding.
Yes.
Because, I don't know, your branding wasn't even good. That logo sucked balls.
Yeah.
But everybody got mad because they remembered fucking In Control and Idra being the bad boys of esports and talking mad shit.
Exactly.
And like it being, it was a community because they lived in this fucking house in Arizona
Why
together.
did these orgs stop doing these things? Because the man, in this instance, told them to and said, you'll never make money. If you want to be in our ecosystem and eat from our table and drink from our cup, you've got to be the good boys. You've got to toe the party line. You've got to... You're an org based in fucking... Well, I won't say Sweden because they'd be happy to do this. But you're an org based in France. So you're an org based in Croatia. You're an org based in Bulgaria. But you've got to align with stupid 2016 US corporate sensibilities. You've got to not have the police volley bear skin because of something that happened on a different fucking continent. And they all said, yeah, all right then, make sense. All the big orgs that even stood for rebellion, even your TSMs, they all became piss weak, watered down versions of themselves. And it's why when I was writing at bad website Breitbart Richard's Evil, I wrote an article over there called "It was personality that put esports on the map, not professionalism." And it's probably the most astute thing I've ever wrote about this industry. The further we've gone from having edge, right, the worse it's got in terms of cultivating an audience. And as Roald is talking about, why would I stick around for something you yourselves barely seem to be enthusiastic about? Why would I align my values with you when it's clear your values are downstream of Riot Games? The man. I don't want to align myself with Riot Games, so why would I align myself with somebody that does what Riot Games tells them to do? Right? It's as simple as that. And like, you know, honestly, the level of edge. And by the way, did we go over the line a bunch? Fuck yeah, old school esports. I just saw a clip of Pasha the other day. I think it was
hilarious.
Yeah, where Pasha said like no homo, and then they said, but not that there's anything wrong with homos. I'm like, wow, holy shit, that's
and then he just kept saying,
and then kept it. But no, like Pasha,
yeah.
His first catchphrase before "you are my brother, you are not my friend, you are my brother, my friend" was no homo all the time. He used to say that all the time, and it's like, you know, obviously now, by the way, we're sort of coming out the other side of the fucking 10-year of utter stupidity that we've had. So I would have had to go, he said something bad and look it up. If this was 5 years ago, I can just say contextually no homo now without getting into trouble over it. It's also really silly and juvenile that anyone would be upset about that. But anyway, but this is what I mean. Like, did we go over the line a bunch? Yeah, we did. But the problem is, if you want to set the tone and set the line and stand for something, you're going to go over the edge sometimes. And this is why the twin rise of America dictates everything in esports. And also, by the way, we've just discovered this thing that works really well called cancel culture. If you want to have a tantrum and get your own way, esports was completely stifled in creativity and growth during that time period. And so once again, Americans were the problem.
I think, you know, at the end of the day, the over professionalizing is, again, you know, the red line in this, and you know, it's just something that doesn't make sense for what the industry is, and for those who are in it and who watch it. So, you know, that obviously is a massive issue, and you know, also I think the fact that it's much easier to be neutral. Right? It's much easier to have no one be upset with you, but you also don't build hardcore fandom.
Or stand out, yeah.
Exactly.
That's what was great about FACEIT, Roald. What you guys did, and we didn't even talk about this at the start, you didn't just incubate playing talent, you incubated broadcast talent. You were the antithesis to the stuffy and professional ESLs. You let guys like James Bardolph and DDK say crazy things on air, and just every time somebody came along and complained about it, that you just said, like, they're our guys. We back our guys. Like, FACEIT was a great company to work for from a broadcast perspective as well, because you weren't interested in, again, over professionalizing.
Yeah, no, I think with FACEIT, you know, I guess one of my bigger regrets to an extent was always when we made that change from FACEIT League to ECS.
Yeah.
Right. And that's when we went kind of the ESL direction of it.
Yeah.
Right. And we lost kind of our entire identity with that. And, you know, it brought some good, because I think we were one of the first to do revenue shares with teams and so on, you know, so to an extent we tried something, but I think the reality is, you know, we lost much more than we gained from that. And we just became another 3-letter entity. And you know, in the end, that's the reason why ECS, you know, got carried over into Flashpoint, because it didn't make any sense for FACEIT anymore to carry on with that, because it wasn't something that represented FACEIT at all, in the way that FACEIT wanted to be perceived, and probably was the actual identity of FACEIT. So yeah, looking back on that, you know, you know, FACEIT League was in the center of the DDoS days of Counter-Strike, which, you know, I still wake up with nightmares from it. But the events that we had during that period were the most fun, because first of all, when we got DDoS, it was kind of like, this fucking sucks. But, you know, we just get Freiburg, you know,
Banana you got to do something fun. And there's no expectation. You can do whatever, right? You're coming up on the fly.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, that's even a real thing people don't understand. Me and Richard didn't sit down one day in a cave and just it came to us to do it. We just had a million fills at a Gfinity or something. We're just like, you know what, fuck it. May as well talk about what we're talking about in the green room. Like, keep it going. They'd just be telling us, do 10 more minutes. You've already finished talking about the game at that point. You just talk about anything. A guy in the crowd. There's people that look how silly the outfit this guy's wearing or whatever. Also, by the way, similarly, I can tell you how you can tie this into the modern day, how it's obvious that over-professionalization has actually stunted the growth of esports. All these TOs and teams having the gall to be like, these bloody core streamers, they're doing what the fan wants to hear, you idiots. They're actually connecting with the fan in a way you, the team and the tournament and the game dev can't. And then you're going, someone's got like what looks like the makings of a golden goose, kill it immediately, as is way in esports.
They've all
fucking time.
crucially created communities.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
They have their own memes.
Yep.
They have their own language.
But it's with Monty. People might think it's silly that Cadrell has the Rats, which is his fans. What do you call a group of Cloud9 fans? No one knows. There's not a name.
No.
I know what you call a group of TSM fans a shower of cunts, but that's my name. That we never caught.
I mean, I'll say this as
Edit
well.
that out just for the monetization.
Right. It's relative as well because Cadrell is actually proving the concept that we've talked about a lot here, the one Duncan's mentioning, and that is that Cadrell has been co-streaming the CS major. And Cadrell's numbers have been pretty close to Owner Pixel's numbers.
It's legit.
Owner Pixel's been ahead.
That shows he brings his own audience for saying the game.
Exactly.
Holy
How many
shit.
of those people, I guarantee you, the majority of those viewers are watching because they're Cadrell fans, not Counter-Strike fans. And so that's the benefit. I mean...
Plus, Oni did that himself with fucking Valorant Pro. Like, it actually proves these people have succeeded, even if you don't like how they do it. On some level, they've succeeded at capturing the audience.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. And so that's another thing where it's like the resistance against that, it sound like the Borg, but resistance against that is futile. I mean, it really is. Like, that battle is over. It has been fought and it has been lost. I know a lot of TOs wanted to push back against core streaming. Now what they're trying to do is control it a bit more, but ultimately you've just got to let it go. You've got to let it go. Introducing all of these silly rules and like mechanisms to like prevent people core streaming, it's a net negative now. Like, you've got to find a way to fold it into your broadcast and make it work for you. I mean, I don't know, for instance, why I haven't seen a single tournament yet go and like, this is what's been happening out. Like, you just have a 30-minute segment. This is what's been going on in our core streaming universe. And you have the highlights of every best bit from someone's core stream. You know, the rising tide guys like we used to talk about 20 years ago. Like that would be a 6 segment. And also, like Roald is saying, that's where the audience who watch clips get to come and watch your broadcast, because your broadcast is now clips. It's also easy. Like, just put me in charge. I'll fix all this shit. Oh, you don't want to do that, right? Because I had a bad tweet 10 years ago. My bad. Fine. I guess the industry just dies then. See ya.
and I mean, probably a big issue as well is that the tournament organizer is also the broadcaster, you know, and to an extent that doesn't make sense, because as a tournament organizer, you need to play a lot of politics, right? Because you have teams on, you know, revenue share and things like that. You need to appease teams and so on. So if you then have a caster on your broadcast saying, you know, something mean, you know, you have crying players as a tournament organizer. So you want to avoid that. So, you know, there's already a kind of a
so it's actually a really good point. That's
Yeah.
a really good point, because usually there's a layer of abstraction between the broadcast company that's buying the media rights and the entity that is actually organizing the competition. And there's plausible deniability. You could be like, I don't know, man, like, take it up with the fucking broadcaster. Like, did the tournament run well? Like, fuck off, you know? Go fight with them.
Yeah, go boycott ESPN or CBS. Is, you know, that's up to you if you want
Also,
to do
you're
that.
right as well, Roald, in the sense that actually that is another element that makes broadcast be safe. It is actually fear of pro players and then pro players stimulating their fans. People will know this story from a few years ago. Literally, when Evil Geniuses had that bad CS team, that North American one that was just really trash with Stewie 2K, they were famously just losing every match. And what happened was ESL, on like a pro league or something, bro, which is even the broadcast where you're supposed to be like having jokes and stuff, their talent was told, you are not allowed to make fun of Evil Jesus anymore. They've complained, which again is like, what sort of bizarre conflict of interest is this? Because you have a partnership with the team, I can't make the joke that the fan would want to hear. Meanwhile, I'll give you an example again of where people in esports never get until too late what the golden goose is. Right? I've told this story before, so I'll say it on air. I won't hide the names. About 10 years ago, 2 of the players, even though the joke is now they'd both be really cool to me if they're on broadcast. Fallen from now Furia, then SK Gaming, I assume it would have been back then, and Taz from Virtus Pro went to a DreamHack after the DreamHack and went. It wasn't. I don't know if they said Richard. They said I'm making jokes that are too mean or something like that, right? Yep. The gag is, I had Fallen on one of my talk shows, Snake and Banter, last year, and now he said this on stream, so he leaked this, not me. He said after the call, when I left the call, because I had to go do something else, Fallen even said to him something like, "Nah, I missed Thorin on the event, so why does he do the events anymore?" It's like, people like you were actually personally requesting I no longer be hired to do them. Oh, but 10 years later, you've realised now that you're older and you get that's an entertainment product. Yeah, it's actually pretty good to have people who are entertaining on the broadcast who even stimulate potentially fan passions, just not always in the most perfect way. Yeah, that's actually a plus positive thing to have on your broadcast, and would argue.
Yeah.
Now, if you're like me or Thorin or Richard, you might be really tired from fighting the good fight in esports. And there may be some healthy food lurking in your refrigerator, but you're too exhausted to deal with it. Well, it's a good thing that you have Factor, because Factor will deliver you fresh, never frozen meals weekly directly to your house, and they're much healthier than takeout options that you might be considering if you're just too damn tired. Every week they'll ship you a box that's chilled, and all you have to do is pop it in your refrigerator, and then whenever you want a Factor meal, just heat it up in 2 minutes. It is so easy. They also have meals built around your goals, and that might be weight loss, overall nutrition, more protein, GLP-1 support, strength and workout recovery. You could even check out Factor's Muscle Pro collection. Factor bans 175 ingredients, including no artificial colors, there's no or sweeteners, there's no high fructose corn syrup, no refined seed oils, just nutrient-dense foods. And also, they have great variety. There's over 100 options that rotate every week. So it's not the same option, so you will never get tired of what Factor has to offer you. They now have globally inspired flavors as well, like Mediterranean and Asian food. So there's always something new to look forward to. They also can put a bunch of other stuff in your box. Personally, I really like the protein shakes that you can get as an addition. You can get breakfast as well in there, as well as snacks. So there's really no limit. And if you ever want to go on a vacation, all you have to do is go online and pause it for that week. It is super, super easy. You will not pay for that week. So it fits your budget and your lifestyle as well. So, guys, I would definitely check out Factor. You guys can head to factormeals.com/horsemen50 off. That's horsemen plural. So that's HORSEMEN 50 off, and use code horsemen50 off to get 50% off and free daily greens per box with new subscription only while supplies last until September 27th, 2026. See the website for more details. This is a great way to stay in shape and get your nutrition goals met this summer, guys. Factor is fantastic. We wholeheartedly recommend it. And of course, remember that supporting our sponsors is a great way to help us out here at the Four Horsemen keep doing our thing. So remember, factor.meals.com/horsemen50 off. And thank you very much to Factor for sponsoring us here on the Four Horsemen.
I mean, obviously as well, I guess we'll start steering the conversational ship around to what should we be doing in the future? Like what would Roald change and what should we change? But just to tag on to that point as well, it is weird when if entertainment is what sells, and we are an entertainment product, more so than a sports product. It is strange to me that people get so precious about mockery and ridicule, which is a key component of entertainment. I mean, I have done ridiculous things in the name of a broadcast.
You dabbed one time.
Well,
I saw it.
Fuck. No, why? No, I did. I did dab. And I also dressed up as fucking Hachi from fucking Tekken when we were doing the fighting game stuff. I'm more than capable of laughing at myself, and so's Duncan. We made fun of Duncan. at a major, you know, like we brought up kid pictures of him and all sorts of stuff, you know.
There was one time where they put me in like edited in as I was in the Rocky Horror Picture Show with all like stockings.
We made you Doctor. We made him
on American TV.
We made him Dr. Frankenfurter on American television, right? and you know that's like people always say, like, oh, Duncan and Richard Lewis, thin skins, you know, because they block people on Twitter. I'm blocking you because I think you're a fucking imbecile. It's got nothing to do with you've hurt my feelings. I just don't like to listen to imbeciles all day. And in esports, unfortunately, you're exposed to a lot.
It's hard to have people just yelling stupid shit at you, and it's easier to prevent them from doing it.
I'll even up the ante, because I was talking about this the other day. I can't remember if it was on Maui's core stream or something. I was even saying, because I know this has been floated in an idea before, LFN should just do this. We should just do our own fucking roast of Richie Lewis, roast of MonteCristo, and have all the people come on and do it like a proper roaster where the comedians are goes hard as fuck,
exactly.
And everyone in the industry goes hard as fuck.
And everybody would turn up to watch that, right? And this is what I mean. It's like, look, say what you will about the Alex Garfield evil geniuses. When it came to money, when it came to players, they were ruthless motherfuckers. They wanted the best talent all the time on the most lockdown contracts, adhering to the strictest rules. And that was just how they rolled. But they could laugh at themselves, and very often routinely did poke fun at themselves in all of their content. And you know why? People like that. Fans respond to, you know, you being relatable. And like being able to lean into a bit of ridicule and poke fun of yourself. I know it's mental, isn't it? And like when orgs are coming in and like being all stuffy and making the broadcast like button down to the point where, you know, Duncan had to walk away from an entire avenue of work because one player was having a breakup with his girlfriend and caught feelings during a tournament, complained, and it went all the way up the chain of the command to the TO saying to Duncan, can you just not tweet for the rest of the event? Well, you're not paying me not to tweet, so no, I'll fucking tweet when I want. And it's just so absurd that, again, this is the product these orgs are building, and it's not what fans want. It's not what we want to be a part of. Nobody really enjoys stuffy professionalism in a space that's meant to be fun.
Got into esports to be part of this, by the way, because we were all here before everybody here was here before it existed. That's if this had been my experience at the start of my career, I doubt I would have been interested as a literal
the forum
teenager.
Beef generation, right? Everyone on this call had beef with someone on forums, and we typed absolutely outrageous fucking shit to them, right? And then when we weren't doing that on our own community forums, we were looking at 4chan the rest of the time. Like now the fact that our sensibility has been entirely almost entirely eroded from esports, when that's just what esports essentially was. It was like shit talk and pop-ups and who can prove they're the best and walk around like you've got the biggest dick. That was it. Like that was what it was all about. Yes, was it steeped in machismo? Of course. Yes, did it sometimes feel a little bit like an exclusive place to just guys? Yes, I get it. I think one of the great things modern esports has achieved, probably the only good thing, is we have now opened our doors provably to everyone. Everyone's here. Everyone wants to be a part of it. Everyone's welcome. The whole notion of esports being an unwelcome place is the biggest fugazi, the biggest lie ever told about.
By the way, it is absolutely insane that anybody would have ever said that, because esports was never exclusionary at the beginning, because it was just the only thing that mattered was like, are you into this game and do you want to talk some shit about it? And like people were very liberal, and it was like nobody really cared what your identity was. Like I mean, I never experienced any kind of like gatekeeping around that, because basically it was a small community, but it was truly global. Like there weren't enough people to say like, oh, this is only an American thing. At least in the esports it was like you were constantly talking to people from Korea, Europe, America, fucking Brazil. Like there was always, and frankly, that's what made it one of the things that made it interesting to me, because I was meeting all different kinds of people. I mean, I lived in fucking northern Colorado. I got to meet people from and talk to people daily from like Germany and France.
And to the point
cool.
I'm making as well, one of the things that esports has moved away from, and this is, again, it's going to blow everyone's minds, you know, because I actually have black friends and gay friends and trans friends, right? They like to laugh at themselves too, you know. They like to be the butt of the joke on an occasion, you know. Like we said, come in, and then we're all tipping around like on eggshells. No,
they're also not like weak little
they've got the exact same sense of humor.
Can protect themselves.
Yeah, they've got the exact same sense of humor as all of us. You know, the only group I'll exclude from that is the French, right? But generally speaking, people like to poke fun at themselves and each other and shit talk, and we all walk around on eggshells, and we've made this like unbelievably sanitized, boring product that I think rolled one of the reason a lot of the youngsters actually are a bit leery about esports and only want to be here when something big is happening. It's because it's become fucking cringe on some level. That's my feeling anyway.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think, the better examples that you can look at where it probably worked. I mean, I'm not a massive follower or fan, so you can correct me, but it's like a UFC, right? You have a Dana White who goes on podcasts and says the most outrageous stuff.
Yeah.
But they still get massive sponsorship deals, and people spend hundreds and thousands of dollars on merchandise and things like that. So it's like it is possible to
but that's the fallacy, Roald. Is it's the cargo cult mentality where people in esports, it's just about size, right? If you get enough people like the UFC and they spend money, then you're going to be able to sell the product, which is the broadcast, right? And companies will only say no up until they can't afford to say no anymore. And this was the great fallacy, which is like, and when you and I worked on Flashpoint together, it's like Flashpoint was very much about, it was a very different tone. Let's put it that way.
Oh yeah.
And
you did
the thing about it was
taking LSD and all sorts of shit.
It was fun, man.
Yeah, fucking right.
But it's like, the thing about it is like, if you're big enough and you're actually tapping into the zeitgeist, then you don't have to worry about that. But what esports thought was, like I said, the cargo cult. It's like, well, if we build a professional sport, then we will receive money like traditional sports, right? But no, you just alienate your audience and then you never reach the size. If you actually build the product well, it doesn't matter if you're edgy, You think Joe Rogan's having problems getting sponsors?
Yeah, exactly, dude. And that's what I mean. It's like the stuff that we refuse to touch or talk about, the tone we try and strike, the listening to what developers want over what we know works, because ultimately we're hoping for a bigger cut from them, or even like we're worried they might be capricious and pull the license away from us and all this stuff. It just doesn't have to be this way. Like I say, esports, like it should be fun, it should be hip, it should be connected to what is actually fucking important to a broad audience. Like, I mean, again, like not just one type of fan, but multiple types of fan all around the world at different stages of their life. And it just isn't. And it just obviously isn't.
Yeah, and on the flip side, it's also okay, to not be for everyone.
Oh, I couldn't agree more as well. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's where it's gone very wrong, and that's part of professionalizing in the end, is you try and be okay for everyone.
Yeah.
And the reality is, if you have a Counter-Strike, probably someone who's 15-year-old shouldn't be watching it anyways. So, don't be afraid of profanity or saying something that, is a bit extreme. So, it's just know who your audience is and speak to what they want to hear and what they want to see and what they want to do. And if they listen to certain music, play that music. Not because you're a producer and you want to be professional, you play a certain type of music or whatever, right? So it's really like 1,000 small little things all coming together, and it's just about, what does your audience actually want? Are you actually speaking with them? That first and foremost. Are you, as the CEO of a company at an event, speaking to every single person that you can speak to and ask them, what do you watch on TV? What do you like about the broadcast? What do you hate about the broadcast? Who's your favorite, caster?
It's why doing it on Reddit is the fucking crime. because Reddit is such a fucking particular type of person, and in his
It's the definition of the echo chamber, isn't it? It's barely anyone in there.
And it's the most astroturfed shithole website on the internet. Like, you would never, if you wanted to know what people really think, Reddit would be the worst platform for it, because one, the way it's designed is it is a literal consensus machine where only the things people agree with gain enough notoriety to be seen, and then are typically then snowball voted further up by people who agree with those viewpoints. You would never find a contrarian thread doing well on Reddit by design.
It's also the death of nuance, because even if there's a good opinion that people would agree with, if it's too long, they won't read it.
Yeah, I mean, and also, you know, on top of that, the type of person that uses Reddit, who are they really? And yeah, turns out they're either, I mean, again, ignoring all the bot accounts, they're an American somewhere between 20 to 40, you know, say 21 to 40 years old, right? And they're unbelievably liberal, like massive shit lib, tanky
and
version
probably
of
work in
liberalism.
tech.
Yeah, and probably don't have a job, if we're being honest about it. And that, and if that's the audience you want to get feedback from for your product, fucking hell, think about what you're gonna build. And think about how fundamentally incompatible that is with esports. I mean, you know, put it this way, I know for a fact that whenever a Reddit thread goes up about like Duncan being an asshole, that's like, add an extra 3 months onto the Return of the King, you know, like it's not. Or with Maui Snake. Maui Snake's the most misunderstood broadcast talent in Counter-Strike. Every time I see a negative thread about him, well, that's one more ESL event he's not going to get. And it's because these executives fucking go to the subreddit thing. That's where the community hangs out. No, Roald is right. The community, the actual community, they're the people who pay to go to see your event. Go talk to them. Let them be the barometer of what you do. And instead, they just, I've never seen it in all my life. I have never seen an executive from a big esports company out there in the bleachers with the beer and hot dog fan talking to them about what they like and what they don't like.
Yeah. And I think, you know, this is the key to the future of esports is like, now, obviously, the future is money, right? We need money. And we talked a little bit about, you know, betting partners or other partners and sponsors that you could have. But ultimately, the best way to derive money for any entertainment industry is directly from the viewers, right? Yep. You can sell an ad, but that ad is worth less per person than that person paying a subscription, which, by the way, LFN, we're going to start our premium service soon. Don't worry, nothing's changing about our current content, but you're going to get a bunch of bonus stuff, and you'll also directly support us, the company.
The Thorin feet pics are finally ready to go. So
that's right.
That's what it is.
Paywalled feet pics. Right. But, you know, we are going to do bonus stuff for this and give you guys ad-free versions of all of our shows. But the thing is that this money will be going directly to the talent of the shows that you guys watch. Like, that's the whole purpose of this enterprise as a company, is that we are a talent-owned network where the money from the ads and the money from subscriptions and stuff goes to the talent. That's the point, right? And it's building something that we collaboratively own together so that we finally have something of value as people who have never been, you know, it's not like I got a piece of, you know, Riot for working for Riot for a number of years. That didn't fucking happen, right? So we're trying to build something for ourselves. And so I believe that some of you find us valuable enough, hopefully, to support us directly on this. But it is very key to understand that the best way for any esport, a team, a tournament organizer, is to have the direct financial support, because it is literally like 100x value to have like a $5 subscription to someone as opposed to serving them an ad. It's not, you know, it's not even close. Yeah. And so, you know, and going back to the community stuff, like Roald mentioned $100 for Evo. Well, you used to pay like $100 to go to an MLG for a weekend, right? You know, it has to return for that. And I think you made a really good point, Roald, which is that if you're part of a community, you are willing to pay that. But there has to be something more there. It can't just be sit your ass in a seat and watch this esport event. It has to be you get to play or you get to do something else that justifies the expense.
Yeah, and I mean, I fall for that trap as well. I think I did it before where I say like, this younger generation doesn't want to pay for anything, but it's not true. Actually, the statistics go against this. What people spend in like Roblox games and on skins and so on. Kids spend enormous amount of probably their parents' money, but they spend as long as it's worth it for them, right? So if they're not spending on what you're doing, it's not worth it for your audience. So find a better way. And try and experiment and try and do other things. And it goes to show that, the DreamHacks and the Evos, they are managing to get people to pay more money. So there's
even
probably
BlizzCon,
something
right?
in it.
Like BlizzCon, you pay hundreds of dollars to go to BlizzCon. And it's cool because you get it's a community of people who like Blizzard games, but you also get the StarCraft World Championship and the Overwatch World Cup, right? And I can tell you from working BlizzCons, people fucking love that shit at BlizzCon. But they're not going to pay $300 to go to that. They're going to pay $300 to go to BlizzCon and then also enjoy that. Right.
And there's a sense of word of mouth to that as well. Because, if you're paying $300 for a ticket, you're going to try and get all your mates to come with you. You're going to write to everyone like, meet me at BlizzCon because I just spent $300 on just a ticket to go there. Right. That is way more powerful than you can do through, any of your social media as a company. So, once you get people to also pay those amounts of money, they'll get everyone else they know to join you. If one person can bring in 3 or 4 people, you're kind of set. And again, it just feels like there's just a lack of understanding of what really drives people there, and which is the part that people can actually monetize. And Monty, like you said, those kind of sustainable income is much more reliable. And it's something that builds. So it's like if someone enjoys going to one event, they'll go to the next, etc. But if a sponsor pays you for the sponsorship package, for that one event or whatever, there's no guarantee they'll come back because the marketing manager might change or the budget might change or we're not happy with one particular thing. So you always have to go through a mass amount of effort of sales cycles and all these kind of things to get sponsorships in, which is actually way harder than actually engaging with your fans and giving them something that they're willing to pay for. But probably, the first few weeks are more difficult to get this going. It's going to be painful. And you're probably going to have to swallow some hate and stuff from things that you've done in the past. But once you get over that, it should be, it's hopefully worth it.
Yeah, and what Roald's saying is like, because it provides this baseline of revenue, right? It helps you insulate the business against the ups and downs of
the winters.
Of the actual sponsorship cycle, because it is really boom or bust in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And the quote unquote esports winter is the great example of it, right? It's not really an esports issue, but it's a consequence of a lot of things happening in the world. And the first thing that's always impacted is marketing budgets. So if you are a marketing line in a budget, which esports is at the moment, you're going to be the first one to get crossed off. So the moment you stop being completely reliant on that as your main source of income, then you could start building something sustainable. And that then catapultizes you also to sell bigger sponsorships and start selling TV rights and so on. So, again, it's like if you do that part well, the rest will follow. But again, we skipped it.
One thing I've always thought is crazy, we've done episodes on this in the past, is it's obviously one of the number one complaints of team organisers and to extent the independent tournament organisers like ESL, etc. Like, let us have essentially access to the digital marketplace to sell items, in-game things, cosmetics, whatever they might be. One of the problems I have is this, right? Even though Monty is really generous by going, no one can really know what any of it. There's someone that has an access to an Excel sheet somewhere, Monty.
Oh,
someone can get that data.
The executives now.
So the idea to me that if I'm these giant
publicly,
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about if you're the fucking team like Cloud9. If you don't know that number, you are literally incompetent. If I Jack Etienne, if that's still a mystery to you, and you're just sitting around going, what could it be? Could it be 10 billion? Could it be 40? If you don't know, like, ballpark that number, you don't even know how to do your own job. Because literally, what I don't understand is how are they so short-sighted that they still haven't gotten together and made some sort of like a negotiating group, you know what I mean? And gone to the people. By the way, the idea they've let themselves get picked off one by one in the LCS is pathetic. I have so little sympathy for them. You could have gone, instead of doing what Reginald did, the idea of Reginald to be your ringleader, you deserve everything you get, you dickhead. What you should have done then wasn't say, I want to franchise the league. You cretin. It was the opposite. You should have said, pay me to be in your league. You should have said, wait a minute, I am TSM, that's Cloud9, that's Team Liquid, we've got all your fans, mate. If we leave tomorrow, and as you see, Disguised comes and Dignitary, you don't have any fans anymore, no one watches this league. So instead of me buying in for $10 million, here's the new deal, pal. You pay me $3 million a year to be involved with it, and you subsidise like a baseline salary. You'd have done that years ago. Instead, as usual, nobody ever actually does the greater good, like, let's take the short-term hit for the long-term. Everyone's still working on this quarter's numbers, and everyone's still doing that thing of like, but wait a second, if I like almost starve out in this siege, my enemy dies first, though, and then maybe I can like grab his player or something. It's all that shite, mate. So one thing I've never had any sympathy for is, at the end of the day, if you notice, they've done, again, a really, really whack version of this, which is they go, well, I can't get it in League and CS, so what I'll do is, what game does do it? Oh, does Rocket League or something do it? Fuck, I'll get a Rocket League team. And it's like, yeah, but is Rocket League ever going to be as League of Legends? That's your problem there, isn't it? Like, that will plateau. So what I still don't understand is how we've never seen any forward movement on that topic. And again, the idea, I mean, by the way, certain people you will never, ever beat on this one. Like, the joke is, if you went to watch the episode, Lord, that we did with the CEO of Gen G, you'd think I was the CEO of Gen G and he worked for Riot Games. It was mental, bro. I was trying to argue for his. At one point, I just fucking turn evil and go the opposite, tell him to go fuck himself, basically. But I don't even understand how these companies to this day, well, I do. Sadly, here's the bottom line, Richard always says. End of the day, that company isn't their mom or dad's company that they go bankrupt, it's their money. They make their fucking 6 figures salary and get their Lamborghini anyway, don't they? So really, at the end of the day, do they really give a fuck if it goes down that much? I don't know if they actually do, sadly, is my realization.
Yeah, they don't.
I think, unfortunately, this is part human nature, is the fact that, if there's not real pain, you're not willing to make a change. And esports has had these quote unquote kind of bailouts time and time again that has sort of sustained to being able to go ahead. It was VC money that came in all of a sudden that
it's
managed
enough to give people hope. That's what's dangerous about it.
It's enough to keep going on kind of like we are, right? No one's going bankrupt yet, but business is not growing on either. So, we're probably going to go for a long, slow death at some point if it keeps going on like it is right now, right? And then obviously EWC came in with the program that helped a lot of teams out financially in the short term, but no one now goes like, actually, how do we build, use this money to now build a sustainable system for ourselves, and that we can, we don't have to rely on these things now. And, a lot of the reality is, it's easy to continue like this. That's the easy path. It needs a systematic change, because if one person says like, I want to change it, and everyone else goes like, well, you go and change it, good luck with that, we'll double down on this so that you are isolated and you fail. Because I'm okay with the status quo, right? So, but probably a part of the reality is, if, let's say, EWC fell away or that VC money never arrived, esports would have gone through real trouble. But at least there would have been real change to build something that probably would have been more sustainable. Like, lots of teams would have gone, and the ones that would have been capable of adjusting or finding sustainable ways would have come out, survived, and thrived probably. But as long as that moment doesn't come, my fear is like esports will just keep going on like it is now, and
Do you think that's the case, by the way? Because I do get the sense that, like, one of the reasons we always hit the esports winter thing really hard is, I think some people really do think it's like COVID. It's like, how much longer do I have to wait till it all just goes back to how it was before? I think a lot of people are still thinking that over that hill are coming all the investors again with all the fucking... And I'll tell you, as far as I know, that's not at all what's going to happen, maybe ever again in this space. Like, that part, we've jumped the shark as far as I can tell.
No, and I mean, if you look at sports as well, it's like, why did sports have, a big money? It was because the sports clubs would play things of rich billionaires. It wasn't to make money off. Yeah. But if you have a VC, it's nowadays not even enough anymore to become a unicorn. You need to sell for at least $10 billion, right? That's what, 5x the whole value of esports now. And with everything going on in AI, like you have $1 trillion companies now, or close to $1 trillion.
We actually had an investor we talked to, because our company had the problem of right when esports went to hit, we were approaching these people. We had someone who was even saying like, yeah, it all checks out. I can even see it's a cash flow positive business. Problem is, there's no way your company can 100x. It's like,
exactly.
Well, and I told him,
I'll
tell him, technically it can, mate. You just have to give me $50 million first, but you're not going to want that part. Yeah, you're right, though, it can.
So we had an investor who is willing to make, a potential 7-figure investment, which is not a lot, but, for a seed investment as the company's starting, it's not bad, right? This investor, it was a venture capital firm. They were knowledgeable about gaming and esports, so it wasn't some rando. They literally had been pitched a bunch of esports stuff before. They came to us and they said, this is the best business we've seen in esports, but we can't invest in you. And the reason is that they ran calculations. They really wanted to invest in us for what it was worth. And they really did a lot of work. And, they were great. But, they can't just make decisions because they're limited partners. Basically their investors expect a certain prospectus to be followed, right? And so their hands are tied, even if they think it's a good business. If it can't do the thing that they've promised to their limited partners that could be a result, then they can't invest. Makes sense, right? So basically, they ran the numbers rolled, and they were like, what if LFN became the biggest podcast company in the world? Now, obviously, that's ridiculous. We would never be, we're a fucking esports company. Yeah, we're doing other stuff now, but like the jump from us being esports to, bigger than Joe Rogan or, I guess the Ringer went from traditional sports into pop culture. So let's just say the Ringer. So the Ringer sold to Spotify for $200 million, right? Even if we were bigger than the Ringer, it couldn't justify the investment in us. There was no way for them to make enough money to invest, which, it's a problem with media companies, honestly. This is why media companies typically don't get venture capital. Because, that's for...
Because the same money could just go into the AI company that can 1,000x. That's real,
And here's the thing. We are much more likely to be successful in that we already have an audience. Like podcast, revenue is a very known thing, right? You get X many views. Here's the CPM for advertisements, But, so we're we have a higher floor, like a lot higher floor. But the thing is they're going to invest in 100 companies in the hope that one of them 100Xs. And we just couldn't be that one.
Yeah.
So no money.
Right. No, and, I think there's such a common misconception about what VC is, and and there's not necessarily something inherently wrong with VC. It's just most businesses are not suitable for VC. That doesn't make those businesses bad. It just doesn't make them suitable for that certain. It's one of the ways you can get financing. You can go to a bank, get a loan, which is often much better for you as a business, or you have private equity, which is a completely different model. In VC, you need to become
for example, we're much better suited to like a family office, like a billionaire who's making investments because, we have a high floor, but maybe not as high of a ceiling, but we're a very safe investment, I would say overall, and likely to continue to grow.
Yeah. So, the reality esports simply cannot offer that, and that inherently is the model simply doesn't support that. There's maybe
that's the thing is they
solutions.
Tried. Yeah, they tried because just to be clear, people thought if this was going to be 100x, right? That's what the Morgan Stanley report is. When we buy the franchise and it gets as big as the NBA, it will 100x. That's why the money was there. That's also why the money's not coming back.
No, exactly. But I mean, even with that context, again, hindsight 2020, it still doesn't make sense because I mean, maybe NBA is a bad example here. But if you look at European soccer clubs, they're not very profitable businesses.
No.
So even that as if you're a VC, you probably want to stay away from that as well.
Well, Roald, I think the logic was that, American sports are not profitable for the prices they command. Their revenue doesn't justify how valuable they're valuable for scarcity. But I think what the VC companies were thinking is these are, as you said, billionaire toys. So we're going to grow it. It's going to get as big as the NBA. And then we're going to exit by selling it to a billionaire to be a toy.
Yeah.
In which case it would have been worth it.
Yeah, but that's extremely risky strategy, right? That you're hoping that there might be a billionaire who wants to have this as their plaything, right? But if you look at traditional venture capital,
I'm just saying what I think they
IPOs.
were thinking.
Yeah, no,
Is it
no,
a good
no.
idea? Who knows?
I mean, you're probably right. But yeah, obviously that it's a massive topic in itself. But but the reality is you probably don't want VC to come back because it simply does not suit the industry for the majority of it, right? So the truth is, we need to be able to sustain ourselves. That is it. If you can't build a business where you can sustain yourself without having to rely on an EWC club program or a VC or whatever, maybe you can keep lingering on, but what happens if EWC decides to say, well, guys,
brother,
we have enough?
That's what this is the thing I fucking hate about these owners, man. The shit they say with a straight face. Like, they say to you, like, I had to take that money because what do you want me to do? Like, close down the org, fire people? I want you to run your fucking business, bro, like without having someone to fucking bail you out every single fucking
Also
time.
saying that to us who turned down this Saudi money, which would have run our company and paid all our salaries. Yeah, it's weird. You almost have to like pull yourself up by these things called bootstraps and, be a startup and not take all the fucking money top down your wank when you haven't built the business out. It's crazy. The reality is in it when you don't have someone to fucking subsidize it.
Just berserk.
Look, I mean, if you take that money, then use every single cent of that to build a sustainable business so that next time you're not reliant on it. If you do that, I can say like, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
But if you just say like, well, this is our business now, then at some point that's going to go terribly
unfortunately
wrong.
Most of that stipend is just going into a debt pool.
Of course.
And this is
it'll just be stealing from Peter Paul, won't it?
And this is why a lot of these orgs have to do the all the tiered approval fucking things and get the extra inducements from the Esports World Cup. Make sure you send 60 fans, all of these things. Make sure you're there on this day and do this, and all this extra stuff they have to do. These incentives is they have to do it because it's not a sustainable business model. It hasn't been for a long time, and they're using this present money that, by the way, is going to go away very soon. I know you're in the same boat as me, Roald, in thinking, because of what we've seen in like Live Golf and the snooker and the Saudi pie is shrinking, and their investment portfolio is shrinking. That it is. I imagine you agree that Saudi money is going to go away soon. So it isn't even sustainable. You might get yourself out of debt, but what are you left with afterwards? And I mean, this is it's going to be just one more sugar daddy. Please, there's got to be another country that can.
By the way, one thing that's an obvious elephant in the room as well, and I understand, like, unfortunately, this is one of those topics where the simplistic solutions are all stupid because they're simplistic in the same way as, in League of Legends in Europe, now all these people have woken up and decided they're geniuses, like fucking journalists and stuff, bro, and just get rid of franchising tomorrow. It's like, you fucking dickhead. You haven't even thought anything through whatsoever with this. So,
I should have thought of that one.
I'll give you the obvious example for the industry. If I was someone who was an outsider and I came to this industry, I wouldn't invest 1 cent, and here's why. Because there is zero logic beyond human nature and the fact that, like, no one wants to take the sting as to why the wage bill for top players is what it is relative to the income source of the industry. It is absolutely absurd. And I do think part of it's still stupid things like you want to brag to people who aren't in esports that people make millions of dollars. It doesn't make sense that I pay nothing to watch the game and then the player makes millions of dollars to be like the 127th best League of Legends player in the world. That's absurd. And again, it's a collective situation. Like the orgs, I'm sorry, here's the worst thing about it, right? They'll all use the thing of like, well, it's an industry. No, it isn't though, because here's the thing, like in Counter-Strike, for example, you wouldn't even need that many people to have like borderline cartel behavior.
Yep.
Let's say like 8 of the biggest teams got together. Beyond the 8 biggest teams, there aren't even giant salaries. You know what I mean? Like you already drop quickly from those 50Ks to the 20K to someone's on 12K a month to suddenly you're in a team that might be in the playoffs of a tournament and they're on 8K a month. Like that's the one of the craziest things ever to me, because that is a completely unnecessary expense. It isn't even based on something. It's not like it's been generated from something. It's just market behavior of like, well, I'm willing to pay slightly more than you. We're all fucking each other over to get the player.
You know what's so weird about this is that this is one thing we can take from sports, because sports figured this out, which is the following. Entertainment industries, including sports, pay about 50% of revenue to talent.
Yeah.
That's literally what the group negotiations, like that's what the salary cap of the NFL is. I think it's 52% of revenue goes to the players. And I can just tell you, we run an entertainment company at LFN. We pay 60% of ad revenue directly to talent because we have lower costs, right? But that's just what we do. And the rest of it goes to growing, sustaining the company, providing production resources, like all of the costs that we have, right? To support the shows. But the hosts you see are getting 60% of the ad revenue, right? And it's a good deal, right? But this is a known quantity. But for some reason in esports, they're like, oh, well, even without collective negotiation, which is how the players in America acquire these around 50% of the number for the salary caps, the players just get the lion's share of the money. It's not unusual for players to get more than 100% of revenue. More than 100%. The team's just losing money.
I mean, it's bizarre. But I mean, also part of a potential solution would be is like, there's a lack of inflow of talent, of player talent, right? Because your issue is, if, I don't know, easy example, if Simple goes from one team to another, he's only going to do it if he gets a bump in salary, right? But if you then don't have any young talent who comes into the industry who will take that, small paycheck, but might just be as good, you're just going to have a merry-go-round of the same players joining all the different teams every single time, getting a small paycheck bump, going up and up and up, and no one's coming in from the bottom to replace these players, or at least not enough is coming through it. So again, that's that systematic benefit of having this grassroots industry where new players can come through, and FPL for Counter-Strike has done an okay job, but there needs to be much more, and even as competitions, you can say like, okay, maybe you need to draft a new player, every once in a while if you're a LEC or something like that, who gets the rookie salary. Is those kind of things that could potentially help. More people get opportunities to really realize their dream, and to suppress inflated salaries to an extent. So. Again, it's something that systematically is broken.
Well, Roald, your mind will be blown as to why there can't be a salary cap for League of Legends in North America.
Oh, please,
because okay. So basically, the problem with that is that Riot run the tournament, right? So if they set a salary cap, then they have to negotiate against a union. Now it's a union of players.
Yeah.
Can you guess what other unions they may not want to create as a company?
A team union.
No, a developer union.
Right.
Because this is a problem with the publisher of the game being the same company as the tournament organizer and the broadcaster. If there was a third party involved as the tournament organizer, like, the NFL, the NFL doesn't own the IP and doesn't make the game of football. The problem is that Riot will never allow a salary cap, because then they would have to acknowledge a player union and possibly a team union too, as you point out. Because if they do that, then they set a precedent where their own employees might unionize against them.
I mean, it's politics, like everything at the end of the day, right? But there is the solution of get new talent in, and then you don't technically need to impose a salary cap, because if you're a team and you can't afford it, then maybe, I don't know, you set not a salary cap, but you can say to a team like 80% of your revenue needs to go to, or is a max that you can spend on salaries, right? It's not a salary cap. But for example, European football, that's quite a common rule that, you can't spend more than X% of your revenue on players. So you don't set the cap, at least on player level. And this way, I can't afford the superstar anymore, so I need to bring in a young player. Because, he's just as good, but he'll settle for a lower salary. So, there are obviously ways around that, I suppose. I don't know if they'll be as effective, but, don't know until you try.
Well, I mean, the other problem you've got with that is, unfortunately, most of these orgs are just fucking incompetent, mate. I mean, they can't, they don't have a trusted scouting system. I mean, like, quite notoriously, like, the guy who's been the GM for Team Liquid for over 10 years still has a job, and almost every roster move they've made since 2019 has appreciably made the team worse. They also, as well, just recently deliberately made their own team worse so they could get into the NA region, just so they could limp into this major and then get knocked out in the first stage, just so they can have some sticker money. It's a disgrace. They're run like they're run like an absolute fucking embarrassment. I don't know how they have any fans left. And it's like, I think back, like, some of the smaller orgs have been unbelievable, like Whip Smart with how they've developed talent. Mao's quite famously in Counter-Strike. All of their academy team that was dominating the academy scene all went on to be starting roster level players. They've sold some of them for money. Ents was another one, unbelievably well-run team, discovering talent. I go over to Dota. I remember when OG had to replace their own fucking legendary lineup. They were able to discover talent like a motherfucker, for instance, ATF, as we now lovingly call him. He's one of the best players in the world, and it's like, so if these orgs can do the talent thing, why can't the bigger orgs with more resources do it? Oh, that's right. You don't hire the right people. Or I think on some level, they don't even want to do it. They don't want to be the Moneyball team. They don't want to do sabermetrics. They want to be the big spenders. That's what feels good. I'm getting a known quantity. I'm buying a top high-level player. By the way, if you think that tactic works, go talk to Falcons. I spent more money in Counter-Strike than any other org ever, and they've won exactly one trophy. So,
And the bizarre part is where we have insane amounts of access to data. If you look at any physical real world sport, you don't necessarily have that data directly, right? You need to dissect it and, put it in spreadsheets. Basically,
you don't have an API.
Yeah, exactly.
And perfect information.
In a game, with games you do, and even based on telemetry and stuff, you can read on like how they perform under pressure and things like these. So that can already, you can already see like, okay, how would they perform in the final of a major, even though they've never played a major. And based on those kind of things, you can see like, how do they coordinate with teammates? How would they fit within our squad and so on? You have access to all these things. They exist. And, I think especially nowadays, you can build those things more than easier internally, even if you want to. So, that's something that I could never understand with esports in general. It's like we have massive amount of data, but our data usage is worse than, many other forms of entertainment.
Oh, definitely. I mean, yeah, because it's like Thorin said, there are numbers that I would expect any CEO worth their salt to know in our industry, and I don't think they do. I think maybe it's a broader issue that maybe we do know the numbers, but we just spend so many time lying about numbers. We've all accidentally gaslit ourselves into believing fake numbers, Because, I mean, that's been the other big problem in esports. We have never accurately represented this industry's size or what our fan base is like. You made a point earlier, Roald, about it's better to have 10,000 hardcore invested fans than 15 million that would never buy a jersey. Absolutely true, by the way. But the reality is we don't chase the first, we chase the second, because we're still living in big number good world, even though the last 10 years of esports proved to you big number meaningless. It's sad that these people like don't use the real data that is out there achievably You can just get these figures. They don't use it to make any decisions. And it's just like, this is why none of your businesses work.
Yeah, and I think also, the metrics that are much stronger. I think nowadays, even brands and so on will resonate with this much more. It's like, I think a lot of brands don't really care about clicks and kind of these vanity metrics that on themselves are, everyone realizes they're pretty meaningless now.
Yep.
It only matters if someone buys something in the end, right? Or then also gives you a follow on the social media so that they become more invested and they'll follow your brand now, right? And I think esports could, if we'd cater more to it and build this deeper understanding of our audience, we could drive those numbers much better than many other industries could. But we're still focused, like you said, on getting the biggest and largest and coolest number out there, even though, it probably isn't actually that important anymore.
Yeah.
This message is sponsored by Raycon. If you've been a little bit tardy on getting your dad a Father's Day gift, well, as a father myself, I can tell you that I appreciate the Raycon Everyday Earbuds Classic, which you can see right here. They come in this stylish pill case, and boom, earbuds. Now, the sound quality on these is fantastic. Also, they have a really effective active noise cancellation, which I've used many times on public transportation. I was using them on the plane as I just flew over to America from Korea, and I can tell you they do a very good job of blocking out sound. And if you want to hear things around you, you can go to the awareness mode, just hit the button on the earbud itself, and it'll switch the modes, and you can hear right through it again. And now's a great time to get them because they are 15% off. They also have multi-point connectivity, so you can pair them with two different devices at once, which is very handy if you're switching between devices, obviously, and you don't want to have to go and fool around with it. They also have a lot of kind of unique colors. I have the black, but you can get colors like blush violet or cool mint that are really unique. So they kind of feel like an accessory that actually fits your style. And they deliver the same premium audio quality as the big brands, but at half the price. And the reason they can do that is because they sell it directly to you, and they don't have brick and mortar stores and a lot of overhead costs. They've had over 3 million happy customers. And if you or your dad don't like them, they have a 30-day happiness guarantee. So there's no reason to overpay. If you don't like them, you can just go ahead and send them on back. But I think you will like them. They're great at the gym. They're great on public transport. They're great basically everywhere. So you can upgrade your dad's everyday routine. Go to buyraycon.com/horsemen. That's horsemen plural, HORSEMEN, to get 15% off. That's buyraycon.com/horsemen. And thanks a lot to Raycon for sponsoring us here at the Four Horsemen.
Put it this way, I have like a concept like this that I've tried to apply in media space for many years. It used to go like this. If you go back in time, like 15 years ago, to when people like Kim Kardashian popped up, obviously every person was just like, she's a bloody idiot. Look, it's just because she showed off her ass. And I just remember thinking, like, how did she become a billionaire fat then, mate? There's a lot of people on Instagram and a lot of platforms trying to show their ass who have like 2K followers, by the way. And or they have like an OnlyFans that has 2 subscribers, some weird old guy and their ex-boyfriend who's just on a fake account. Like a lot of people, that what you have to realize is you don't have to like the actual person, but essentially they've mastered something about marketing and tapping into some sort of a current or a stream of how people think and access and pay for things, that there's something to be learned from that. So I would say that to say the following. I fucking despise Carmine Corp fans in League of Legends. I actually think, bearing in mind, I personally benefit nothing from them. They don't even watch English language content, mate. They watch French. I get zero out of them beginning this. In fact, I get a net negative experience. I now have another 10,000 people who say they are going to kill me and my mother is a whore. All the best shit that of all time. And even better, now people I respect in the industry have to play to that audience too and dance around and pretend they're not associated with me, while behind the scenes they're like, you're a legend, I love you, oh, I wish I could come on your show, but I can't. They have to do all this shit. So to me, it's a net negative. But I say all that to say, they've clearly in that organization, though, tapped into something that massive organizations I care about and like in a Friends of the Owners haven't. In America, they haven't been able to tap into youth culture in the same way. They haven't even been able to. There's not even a thing still in America of like, who's America's team? That's not even a thing. There's not even the branding of we're America's team, for fuck's sake. Probably the easiest layout fucking marketing
tried it, didn't
of
it?
all time.
Team Liquid tried it, like, but it's like, in what way? When most of your operations are in Utrecht.
Sure. But I still think that's one of the most bizarre things is you can despise what the Carmine Corp fans are like, but there's something about the way they have tapped into that audience that has to be respected, especially because actually the reason why in League of Legends especially it's nuts is because actually right before Carmine Corp came into the LEC, there was already a team, even though I believe they're owned by like Belgian people, called BDS, which was already thought of as the French team, and they were even actually better than Carmine Corp at the beginning. And the second Carmine Corp came in, BDS had no fans. They were all just Carmine Corp fans. So I also think people need to look at that and look at the audio pixels and the core stream. Again, don't worry about the messaging. The messaging is one thing. We can take that concept and do something better with it, can't we? But the point is, there is on some baseline level, they are success stories that are tangible. They're not completely fantasy. Yeah. And the difference is, as far as I can tell, those numbers aren't fake. Those appear to be real numbers.
Yeah, and I do think that there is light at the end of the tunnel, especially in an age of AI. For esports, which we talked about how communities are more important. And I think that, we need to develop, like Carmine Corp, more online communities where people have these identities around the brands. In Carmine Corp's case, it's just literally being French, as far as I can tell. There's no other identity that's associated with that.
Well, you're a fan of Kometo. That's another big thing, obviously.
Sure. Yeah. Part of Kometo's community, right? And we saw how successful K-Drill was with Los Ratones and everything like that. So, it should be about communities, both participating in games as well as, having this opportunity to be part of a fandom and a community that you create. But also, part of, in an age of AI, what's coming, guys, is the insane slopification of content. What's going to happen is there's going to be 1 million short form clips as AI gets better that are going to be very difficult to distinguish from real life. And they're going to be generated in vast numbers very quickly, much faster than any human can create content. And so I believe that people are going to look towards live streaming content, sports, including esports, and communities, especially in-person communities or communities that are private in some way, to escape the fucking deluge of garbage. Because these are real things. You can't fake somebody's emotion. I mean, you could make a fake esports event with AI, obviously, but when you know it's real, that somebody in a sport or esport is experiencing that emotion, that it's happening in real time, when you're watching a genuine conversation, or you're interacting with somebody, a streamer on a Twitch stream, or you're in a Discord community, right? These are real things. And I really believe that people are going to start to retreat into these spaces more. And so I think there is a really exceptional opportunity right now to revive esports, because it is in many ways immune to AI slopification, which is good.
Yeah.
By the way, I think that even ties to the whole thing about how this is an area I'm amazed people still haven't figured out, like, consciously. They've just done it by, like, happenstance. When nowadays, when HLTV goes to all the CS events, if they can, at the event, they'll try and get, like, a day or a night or whatever, and then they'll run, like, HLTV confirmed, or they'll do, I don't know, I think they did one live episode of Talking Counter or whatever. Like, I think in the future, that's an obvious way you could add value to your ticket for a massive event. Look, obviously, this is self-serve because I work for a fucking and own a podcast company that could do that for you. But that's why I'm not using the example of my shows. You could do it with all the other ones too. You could have, James Banks does events, he does podcasts. You could do, to me, that's another value add, because like we're saying before, another thing if you go to sports events as well is there's also the whole thing of, like, you go to the tailgate and then you want to go to the signing session. I think people don't realize how valuable that shit is to the fan experience at the esports event. Because remember, again, there might be half the day where you don't give a fuck what games are playing. It's an underdog team or it seems you don't support. Yeah. Maybe that's when you'd love to go to a mixed zone where you can meet Sponge and Moses and all, and go watch a live podcast.
Yeah, I think the best analog, the best comparison point of what an esports event needs to pivot to be, it's not necessarily what we bake into sports events. It's music festivals, actually. When you buy
that's a good
when you buy a ticket to a music festival, right, there's probably like 30 bands playing, 8 of which you're interested in seeing. So how do you fill the rest of the time? Well, there's other types of music tents. So if you have broad tastes, you can go and see that band when you have a nice gap in the main band.
Like the house music one or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Or you go, but you're going with a friend too, or your girlfriend or whatever, and maybe they like a different band, and you start to like that band because they put on a really cool show while you're there.
Also true, and yeah, you are are exposed to like things you wouldn't ordinarily see, and maybe you give them a try and you end up liking them. You know, I mean, I definitely had that with music for sure. You know, one year, Limp Bizkit dropped out of the Warp Vans tour and replaced last minute by a German band called Thumb. I would never have watched in a million years. They fucking banged. Great show. Like, we still remember it to this day. But also what they started doing at music festivals. You know, I was there, went to a lot of music festivals when they became like a more mainstream entertainment product, because before that they were always like counterculture iconic moments like Woodstock or whatever, before they just became a matter of fact, you know, that will happen every year. What they started doing was they have a cinema tent. They have like fucking, you know, they have instructor circles, want to learn how to fucking juggle or fire breathe. They'll have a freak show, you know, on the evening. Like what you're probably, I'm sure my age here by saying £400, they're probably like £1,200 now. But what a £400 ticket used to buy you was a 3-day experience where for the entire weekend, I can pick and choose what I want to see and where I want to be and what I want to watch. And if an esports product reflected that, you know, not just through signings, but like, okay, I want to be a pro. I want to get better. Can I go to? Is a legendary pro going to put on a coaching session? Why not? We could do that, right?
Well, and you know, Riot's kind of tried to do this because they have their fan fests at Worlds. But like, I can tell you from having been at these experiences, even in the last few years, right? There wasn't that much to do. Like Red Bull will have a booth where you can play some League of Legends or whatever, and Mercedes will put out a car on a stage, but it's not very interactive. Let's put it that way. And sure, you know, Worlds is just a one-day event. They don't have to fill a whole weekend. But again, that's part of the problem.
Yeah,
is that it is just a one-day event, and there isn't other stuff to do.
You know, I mean, like we maybe contribute a little bit to the problem, I want to say, because fans that, like, I mean, obviously it was too much in Rio, but the Brazilian fans didn't want to watch the non-Brazilian teams. They would have, and you had the awful scenes in Rio of like non-Brazilian teams playing in an empty arena, which is optically never good. But also as well, I think like there's this expectation that fans should want to sit in their seat all day and just cheer on for the Counter-Strike or the League of Legends or whatever it is that
which
they watch.
Also nobody does in sports. You watch 1 3-hour match. You're not sitting there for 8 fucking hours.
It's like I wouldn't have an issue if we could like create more things to do at the event, and we announced like Duncan always says, it shouldn't be footfall, right, which is the nebulous number we like to use in esports. It should just be the gate, or you know, how much in revenue did you generate, like the UFC does. The revenue they just tell you we sold this many pay-per-views or whatever, you know, and that's when you know like you've actually got something worth money, you know, a product that is profitable. But yeah, we definitely need to make our esports experience like broader. Like when I go to a live event.
Well, it's almost like we created this festival called DreamHack where people could come together and play, and then over time we added non-participatory,
and think about what a fucking nightmare DreamHack was to get to, bro. Think about what you literally had. You land in fucking, you know, the airport in Stockholm, and then you've got to get a 3-hour bus to like fucking Jönköping in the middle of the night, dragging your computer and all your luggage there to then check into the
and your CRT monitor.
Yeah, then hopefully you've been able to book the one hotel that's right next to the venue, and by right next, it's still a short walk. And then, you know, but people used to do it because when you got there, once you were settled, the world was your oyster. I mean, Twitch were there. You could meet all the popular streamers. Twitch had its own.
It was like an alternate culture.
Yeah. Twitch had its own little fucking.
Like, even though I know it must have been sold this way, it was some like Woodstock gaming, esports. At least it really was that way. The vibe.
I think honestly that experience of how remote it was part of the mystique.
Maybe. I mean,
it is because like you had to really want to go to be part of that community, and the journey was part of it. I think it.
I mean, sure. Like again, it did feel like a rite of passage. I just don't know how interested this generation is in rites of passage as a concept. You know, I don't. I think if you presented this generation with massive inconvenience to do something cool, I'll just stay at home.
I mean, isn't the problem, and this is also a bigger esports problem, if you talk about if people don't know, almost every tournament event circuit in some level came from LANs, which actually comes from people not having good internet and people needing to meet up. And again, there not being enough people in there, they're not being matchmaking things. Like, the problem now is if you are the kid who was born today, first of all, you don't play CS:GO League, you play some other game that's Flavor of the Month extraction shooter, or you play a Roblox mod. Then also, you already had DSL and high speed internet from day one of the internet. You didn't know what ping and lag is. Then secondly, why would you need to go and meet people in real life? Your friends are all on Discord and on a Twitter TeamSpeak. So I'm probably aging myself by saying that. Or you just get dropped in with them in the game, or you meet them on a ladder somewhere. Like, again, the experience is totally different, isn't it? So we're also, to some degree, still feeling the ripples of a dream that's long gone. It's a new world in that sense.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Roald, can I ask you a question? What would you do, like, if you could make one big change to the esports industry now, and it can be as big as you want, as in it can even remove something from existence. You've got the gauntlet, you've got all the infinity stones, you can go fucking nuts. What would it be?
Well, I mean, I think I hinted towards it before. Is like I don't think there's going to be systematic change, because if it's one thing, it needs to be a systematic change, right? Without real pain. So the only way to cause that pain, I suppose, is to take at the moment EWC away, and that's not necessarily for EWC being.
I think
EWC.
he actually has Thanos snapped. He's Thanos snapped the Saudis out of his system. Holy fuck! Okay, it's bold. It's bold.
No, but it's not about EWC. It's about the fact that that's where currently the money comes from, and that keeps the system lingering. And again, that's not EWC's problem. That's the problem of everyone else unwilling to kind of fix their own internal in-house issues. But that will force people to make a change. Now, if it wouldn't be, taking something away, it'd probably be something more towards the direction of what Dreamhack is doing, and try and kind of make that the status quo. And also looking at Evo, see if it can bring an American version of that back. And I know Dreamhack goes to the US as well, but MLG, I think, still is deeply ingrained in American gamers, and that console culture more. So it probably bring back around that, and I think those kind of circuits, they need to feed into that large stage IEM Cologne type of event. That can be the pinnacle of the pinnacle. But if I, as a regular guy, go to my local Dreamhack or whatever, or MLG, and I can get to IEM Cologne or EWC, in Riyadh or Paris or wherever it is, then the entire system kind of comes together and says, like, I have something to play for as average guy. I'm going to pay my $150 ticket to be able to go to EWC or whatever it is. And even if I make it, right, and a couple of these teams make it, the demands are going to be lower from those teams. So maybe as a TO, I don't have to put you up in a 5-star hotel now. 4-star or 3-star is okay. I don't have to fly you first class. I don't have to, have the craziest equipment and so on. So it helps the ecosystem in general by then hopefully lowering cost and bringing in more revenue. So yeah, if we talk about not taking something away, it would be like more kind of back to roots events and tie them into the bigger ecosystem. And at the end of the day, EFG has the possibility to do this. They own Dreamhack. They own FACEIT as the online platform.
Just connect the two together.
And they have ESL.
Yes.
And they operate EWC. So they kind of
do the whole path to pro.
Yeah. And so yeah, and I don't know, maybe that's what they're doing already, and that'd be amazing. At the moment I don't see it happening yet, but I think that would, at least be a first step into like a much more cohesive ecosystem that starts from the grassroots system, that monetizes the grassroots system, and doesn't lose the spectacle either. But it gives something to everyone to participate in.
I have an angle on this because one thing I always tell people that actually blew my mind because it's so underreported is it's when I actually learned about how circuits like MLG got going in America in those console games and the games like Halo and COD and shit that I was never following. That was my world. That was from Counter-Strike and Quake and, more European shit. And so one of the things I didn't know basically, and the thing that was the mind blow, because I've never seen anyone connect this publicly, is it's actually very similar to how professional wrestling like WCW and WWE got huge, which is, I never understood as a kid why when they would always brag on WWE about how the big pay-per-views like in New York City, I would always be like, looks at the same venue. Yeah. And what I didn't realize is, no. The regular Monday one is in bumfuck nowhere. And that's how MLG got big. MLG, because I used to wonder why they're bringing me out to these events in Columbus, Ohio. Like I know Columbus from hockey, but like, why aren't we in New York? Why aren't we in fucking Dallas? Why aren't we in LA? Because that's what he noticed. There's another mistake the esports industry made. Because they're all LARPers, they want to be where the action is and they want to seem like a big shot. Even if there's no basis to it, you haven't built the industry up. So instead, basically, things like MLG, the way their circuit ran was they would go to these places where there wasn't much else going on. And everyone would
Raleigh,
all around. Whereas think about
Dallas.
This. In the modern day, the same fan who lives in New York City has unlimited options of entertainment. 1 minute from his house on the internet, they're all traditional established thing. The guy who lives in Bumfuck nowhere might go to that event. That might be a big. He might even have that on his calendar the whole year round. He wants to go and attend that one. So similarly, same thing with wrestling. They didn't then go to everywhere in the whole world until they were huge, until they'd scaled the business up. One of the worst problems we have in esports is no one's willing to actually build anything. Everyone wants to skip to the part where you're world famous, you're in LA, you're shoulder to shoulder with movie stars and fucking Messi and Neymar. You want all that shite and all that. Everyone wants to already get like the veneer of success, but they don't want to actually build the thing that goes, as we're saying, between the fan and the pro scene. And so we just have these two separate worlds.
I will also point out that previously companies like ESL or MLG, not only were they doing locations that had a lot of players, but MLG Orlando, like there's a lot of college players or younger people, high school and college in Florida, but it's not like Orlando is as expensive as Miami, right? And you also are catering to a place that maybe doesn't get as much cool shit, so people are more likely to go to your event because there's less competition. But also, I will point out that even IEM used to, so I went to IEM New York, okay? That sounds really flashy. Do you guys remember where IEM New York was?
I'm going to guess like Comic-Con or some shit like that, right?
New York Comic-Con. You had to buy a ticket to New York Comic-Con to go to IEM New York. It was part, again, of a much larger event. And yeah, there were a lot of people there to watch StarCraft, which is the tournament that I went the last time and only time I went to IEM New York. But it wasn't a standalone event in New York City. It was a stage at something else.
Yeah, I mean, that was another thing that we used to do. Funny, I was just talking about this when I was streaming the Major the other day, but like how early esports was, we would generally try and find a festival of some sort and then tack our shit on the side of it. Like Gamescom, quite famously. I mean, that's why Cologne ended up being a staple on the map. I mean, the first CS major we had at Cologne was during Gamescom, and we were in a little curtained off area. That's
remember the big moment when we came from that route, like you're saying, Richard, was when they would go, we have our own hall. Not even that we left Gamescom yet. So we've got our own hall now, mate, not just a curtain. That was like,
yeah. So I mean, maybe that's something again, like Roald is talking about. We can go back to, and add value. But I think like ultimately, we should be at the size now where we can figure out the way to add the value without like we don't add value to someone else's product. We just have to bake value into our own. And we've got and like there's so many like synergies with like nerd culture that we like broadly ignore. It just seems like a no-brainer.
But you see, those aren't our brands, so we can't possibly integrate them. This is the arrogance of the industry. Like,
I also think it's just short-sighted. I'll give you another example. This is just one, again, it's quite a self-serving one, but I'll give you a random one, right? Recently, Perks, who's involved with some, like, I think French company or something, they've just opened like a LAN center in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands. I obviously live in the Netherlands. And it just made me think, like, wait a minute. Do our companies who live in who are in the Netherlands, who like, you get like watch parties now for the major finals or for Worlds or whatever, are these companies even aware that if you actually contacted someone like me or anyone else who used to work as broadcast talent, mate, we'd probably come and be the host of your event if you wanted, like not even for megabucks either. We're going to watch it anyway at home. Yeah. Like, actually, those are even obvious ways, again, where we only have, this is how stupid our industry is, we only have, congrats, you're top 5 in the world, you work the World Championship on site, you're famous, or nothing. You can just you can have 10 people on their watch party. Like, how is that? Where's all the tiers between? And again, think about how many businesses, if they understood this was a thing, much like the UFC's the obvious example, they would want to have a night where it was the world's finals night, and they'd want to have people who are local come to that, spend money in the bar, have a bar atmosphere. It could become a whole thing. And again, you could make that go on. Also, you could even add the argument that you're increasing viewership or local scene integration.
We knew to do that back in 2016. I mean, again, it wasn't necessarily a perfect match, but Buffalo Wild Wings and E-League, when we did our activation, this was a multi-million-dollar sponsorship, by the way. And if you worked on E-League, if we were the talent, we could get free wings, like anywhere we went. And also, if you wanted to watch E-League on television, B-Dubs had to put it on for you. That was like very like clear part of the agreement. And every week when we were getting ready to settle down into doing the show, what were we doing? We had a little activation where we're like, and look, this is this fan watching live in B-Dubs, and they're sending in their selfies, waving at everyone, and like, saying like, you can go to a B-Dubs now, watch the show, you can watch us next week, then be here. Like, that to me was like, like that's why I genuinely believe this can all work. Like, this makes total sense, because probably as well, going on in the Buffalo Wild Wings, someone's going to rubberneck and be like, what's that you watching? Video games. Oh, okay, well, I'll give it a try. And then, maybe that guy goes home and he talks to his kid. Do you know this video game? Yeah, they were watching it in B-Dubs, It's just a place you go to have cheap wings and cheap beer. And, like, obviously, Counter-Strike's a slightly older demographic. So I thought it was a pretty good fit. Not ideal, not like the perfect tessellation, but there's so many sponsors that we like almost ignore because we've been trying to lean and pivot away from nerd culture. And it's like, look, if we get all of the nerds in one place.
Nerds take over the world. It's already happened. I know it's mental, innit? Why are we going on? We're not bloody nerds in what? Star Wars, Marvel movies. It's the whole world is that, you idiots.
I mean, it's what stick and ball sports. It's why they're all. It's why they're all failing and sort of pivoting to what we were doing 10 years ago. I mean, Duncan's very astute in his observation. The desks now that they're building in sports are the old school esports desks. You get big personalities on and they call each other dickheads for fucking 30 minutes. And then, but by the way, this player's really good because of this. And you go, oh, fuck, that's amazing. And then it's back to banter. So
here's the one that'll really blow your mind, Richard. I know you know this, I'm saying this rhetorically, is they even take that segment, and that's the segment that goes on YouTube and social media. Yeah. Not just the game highlight. In esports, the joke is, half of my segments that were on the fucking desk aren't even on YouTube, mate. The game just begins.
I know it's wild, isn't it?
Some of those games no one is ever going to watch, ever.
I have a feeling you might see some people changing that in 27 for sure, but certainly for the rest of this year. But I think anyway, getting back on topic, I think to Roald's point, if there was a way like the festival culture, that kind of model, I agree. I think it works, and I think it provably works. Not only does it work, it generates growth. It's not just it generates revenue, it's that it can generate growth. Yeah. And I think, if we can move towards that and find the right sponsors and partners to benefit from that, that's how we can fix the esports model,
Yeah, and I think, Thorin, you said something really good there. It's like, nerds rule the world now. And again, freaking age of AI, it's all nerds, why can't you go to these kind of tech companies that say like, sponsor us? They're already doing, if you watch F1, every single large AI model there on the car.
Of course, our audience just hates AI in any context because they're fucking imbeciles. So we've got that hurdle to clear first. Like,
yeah, but there's also that can even be like a way to set it right. We'll try and help you convert this audience to an extent, right? And we play into this. We make it a joke. We do the entire broadcast AI generated, right? Not seriously, but you do a segment and then you say like, look how stupid this is, whatever, right? And there's plenty other tech companies who are probably people who esports will resonate with. So, sell to those people. Don't go to Coca-Cola. Don't go to these kind of brands who probably, their board members are 75 years old and their CEO is 65. And, if you talk about esports, they'll be like, sports? Is this a sport? That's, you sidestep that whole discussion if you go to people who just get it.
No.
And there are plenty of those people. And even, things that I think esports is even quite famous for, the open AI model with where Elon Musk and so on and Sam Altman were training it against Dota 2 players, right? And in the end, it managed to beat whoever won TI that year.
OG, I think.
Yeah, it was they beat them in the 1v1 challenge with the Shadow Fiend, didn't it? And then they that's where it started, and then it went to they actually could program it to play a team, which was like crazy. So yeah, I mean, you're right. Like it's definitely already been there, and people did like that as well, actually, because people weren't cynical about AI back then.
But as an integration, it's a clever idea. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, really,
it's the best place to
really
do
good
it,
point. I'd totally forgotten that had happened. Yeah.
But I mean, even DeepMind, Google's DeepMind used TLO, I think, and StarCraft to train a lot of the models. So there is a very obvious synergy between, AI is one example.
Still can't beat Koreans.
True.
But I mean, there's
it's all good.
Such a obvious synergy between these industry, and it's like, but it's not Coca-Cola. That's on all the big sports broadcasts or whatever the brand is, Heineken or whichever. It's like, who cares? If
thing is, he's just getting back to the same point again, which is in esports, it's us, the fucking idiots in the industry, that can't escape the veneer of the illusion. We don't want to be sponsored by some up and coming of also startup industry where maybe we grow with them as like a soda drink. We need it to be Coca-Cola because it's Coca-Cola, bro. That's real. This is validate. We're all still on that stupid shit. I agree. I even agree we're still on some like we're not nerds, we're jocks things.
Which is really it's really crazy as well, because I remember an anecdote a source told me when I was working on a different story, and it was about like the negotiation of a Coca-Cola sponsorship for an esports broadcast, and the executive said like, you're offering us our logo on your broadcast for these millions of dollars that you want. We're Coca-Cola. We're the most recognizable brand in the world. Like the shape of our bottle is recognizable in almost every country in the world. Like, what do you think we get having a logo in the bottom corner of your broadcast that we don't already get? And it's like, look, there may be the type of brands that, like it's the big one, it's the big prize, but it's not necessarily synergistic to our industry beyond Coke being so ubiquitous. And it's very obvious we don't really offer them anything. If you land it, it's like it's got to be it's the off-brand, it's the new Coke product, the new flavor, the no sugar one or whatever. Like, you're absolutely right. Like, we should be looking at the companies that like they need the up now. Like prediction markets, that's the new thing. Fucking AI models, that's the new thing. I don't think these businesses are intrinsically bad either or intrinsically harmful. And whereas I can definitely say the Saudi Arabian state being here is. So I mean, it's definitely a step in the right direction to look at how we can integrate these sponsors into a show and actually take the time to do it properly instead of just reading off a card or having a fucking graphic come up. Actually do an integration. I miss those. I remember when we used to. Remember we had them in 2015, Dunk. We remember when we used to do integrations. Like, oh, holy shit, we don't do that anymore.
No, I mean, there's a handful that do it, and Chipotle at Evo, I think, is always an amazing example. I think KitKat does a decent job with League. They do all right, but there's definitely not enough, and it's also like again, as the organizer or as the esports team, you want the sponsorship to continue, so put in the extra effort to make it a success. Put in the creative work to make it a success rather than just slap on another logo.
I mean, I'll tell you, that's even an area I can even call out people who are actually talent and people who are on-camera personalities in the industry. I can tell you, within our own company, we've even had this as a challenge. I'll just say, but in the wider industry, it's a nightmare. I can tell you a brief story. 10 years ago or so, I remember doing a Starladder event in Ukraine, and they had a bunch of ad reads that they wanted us to do for some betting company. And even though, like, yes, you can imagine it was Eastern Europe Pro in 2016 in CS, their ad read was almost like, get rich now, put the money in, you will definitely win. Like, it was basically all but saying that. I believe one of the sublines even was, you know the score, or some outrageous, like, again, just like about the least ethical way to advertise gambling. Now, what's funny is I brought up, well, listen, first of all, it's not my style to just read a piece of paper. Like, fucking have anyone do that, mate. Why get me to do it? Also, if I do it, I told the person I'm going to do it my way. So I would still hit all the key points like I would with a baked-in ad on LFN, but I wouldn't say, you know, you're going to win or whatever the fuck. I would go, and if you're really talented or you guess right, you can, you know, I'd do that. First of all, right, I can tell you, the TO were idiots. So they were even coming to me going, this is disrespectful. Please read what is on the sheet. And she's like, I'm not doing that. But this is where I actually had my mind blown. I won't say who. Everyone in this call would know them, though. There were a couple of very famous talent members who just said flat out, yeah, I agree. Why do we have to read those? And I went, what? Because they didn't mean for that thing I had, that little nuance. They meant, like, why should they have to read a live ad on air? And I remember just thinking, like, you are aware, like, I do understand we're getting a day rate, but it is mental to think of this as we're just the highest paid wage slaves in the world. Surely we have some investment in this, like, organized. Surely we want esports to grow. Surely we want the TO to make the money to then pay us the outrageous day rates we all command. They didn't get that, mate. There was a disconnect. I can tell you, even within LFN, we're still, like, gradually bringing people into the process of doing the ad reads and making it personal and making it authentic. Because, by the way, one of the things we've been able to do at this company, I can tell you, is we've got a really niche audience, but they're super activate compared to sometimes people have 10 times the audience, but they're just hoping a person clicks a link or buys.
Shout out to you guys, by the way. Like, some of our audience, like, I mean, some of our sponsors have been very, very pleasantly surprised by your response.
But that's one of the reasons why, though, Monty, because if I do an ad read on one of our shows, I don't have like a pained expression. I don't switch to the I'm reading now, but I don't really want to be doing this. This is my message to my family at home. I am being held by terrorists. Like, I don't do that thing. I make it seem funny or cool, or even, this is the ideal one, like, that's why the show gets to exist, is that we're working this sponsoring and then they're part of the family, as it were. Like, that, you can't beat that. That's exactly
we
what
also
most people
genuinely
want as well.
use the products. I mean, I'm wearing an Into the AM shirt right now. You know what I mean? Like, you know, nobody told me to do that today, but they make good stuff. Like, we turn down sponsors we don't like.
I can't think of a time I've ever plugged something I don't use. You know what I mean? Like, we just, I don't have to. So, but I mean, obviously as well, if you work a show, part of working a show is their sponsors you've got to rep them as well. Like, that's just part of how the sausage gets made. But a lot of people don't, and like I say, I think these days, you know, I'll give you one for free. Do you know what AI activation I would like to see? And it would all right. Pimp, who does our podcasts with Duncan, he gets so much shit online. It's fucking really ridiculous how maligned he is, and the people say he doesn't offer any genuine analysis, that it's just all they go both ways on it. Either he's trying too hard to be edgy and they hate him, or he's not, or he's not edgy enough and they hate him. It's all vanilla. So how about this, right? Who do you prefer, Pimp or the AI? And you get the AI analysis point and you get the Pimp point. And you have the AI in its fucking stupid text-to-speech voice. I thought that game happened. I did it. And then you decide who you want. And then for a day, we'll agree. We'll either have the AI or Pimp. And like, because Pimp would be laughing at himself in it as well. I bet it would be good for the fucking.
Sure, of course.
There you go. There's one for free. I think that'd be great. I'd love to do that on a show. I'll pitch that to PGL tomorrow. Like, I don't give a fuck.
Okay.
I think Anthropic needs some goodwill, so maybe they're interested.
Yeah. Actually. But yeah, you know, there's tons of stuff out there.
Obviously, in the case of GL, you wouldn't be able to tell if it was in fact AI or if he ever did do it.
I mean, because GL couldn't pass a Turing test, so that would be Love you, though. Love you, legend. Great guy.
All right, so I think that, you know, let's move into our final points here, but I think you guys can see, like, the future of esports, I'm actually pretty bullish on, because even
just,
if the bottom
just everything
falls out,
needs to die, everyone needs to hurt, and everyone. Look, okay, I like it.
From
We're
the
almost on
ashes,
sort
we
of a
will
religious
arise
fervor,
like a phoenix.
after the tribulation, after that period where everyone's been tested for their faith, the righteous will survive into the promised land where it will be flowing.
Only the strong will survive the nuclear winter, Thorin.
As it should be.
And the teams will survive by cannibalizing each other. We didn't even go into the fact that Roald's old employer, Fnatic, is trying to allegedly sell themselves for.
Yeah.
I know it's quite, again, below those few $100 million Forbes used to tell me they were all worth. Feels like they'd take 50 million and snap your hand off.
I mean, they're still doing
this.
this thing, but it's really interesting, actually. The company that's been handling the sale, or rather the media that's been reporting on the sale, they are always talking about this 100 million valuation number, but they're the source on it. I haven't seen it anywhere else, and I haven't heard a Fnatic exec say that.
It's also just not how if people don't know, every market is set by the top bidder. You don't just get to go, I think it's worth 100 million. And no bids. Oh, it's worth that.
So it does feel almost like this is a bit of a fishing expedition more than anything. The story went like this: legendary organization Fnatic up for sale, bids expected of 100 mil, and then it became loads of bidders interested in Fnatic. End sale is expected to be 100 mil. Can we name any of those people? Oh, no, not while the bidding's ongoing. It really felt like a fishing expedition the way they did the cover.
And also, it's definitely some famous football clubs.
Absolutely, they said that too. They included that. There are like many famous football clubs total, and it's like, right, there is no way a famous football club is paying 100 million to absorb.
Even the ones
Fnatic.
people are floating aren't even the most famous German ones. It's outrageous.
So I mean, put it this way: I wouldn't buy.
I love they're like Schalke's coming back, guys, with all of their money.
I wouldn't buy.
Also,
Fnatic
shout out to the industry. There are people hooked into the actual industry whose take on the Fnatic sale topic was, "Oh, it's a shame." I always was a fan of Fnatic. It's like, it'll still be here, you mad fuck. What do you think they're buying? Do you think they're just buying it, shut it down and rename it the next day? I know the whole point of buying is you don't give a fuck if it's Sam Matthews anyway. In fact, by the way, the irony of this is some of the people saying that think Sam Matthews did a bad job. Well, brilliant. Get in with some other hands, then you moron. It'll still be fine.
I mean, but
the whole point is to buy the brand.
What's interesting though is, like a lot of people when they do these acquisitions, they don't realize that the brand they've just paid all the money for has to stay the brand. Like, I mean, let's just say, for example, Manchester United bought it. I imagine there would be some executive that go, right, now we can rename this like the Manchester United
Red Devils team or whatever. Something like that.
The Manchester United Fanatics or whatever, and they would change the brand in some fundamental way, and then all the fans leave. And they go, oh, well, that was a waste of money. Well, yeah, you bought a brand and you changed the fucking brand. You could have just launched your own brand for cheaper. Because it's like Roald says, a lot of people in sports think if you absorb a brand, you absorb a brand's fan base. No, they literally just take the jersey off the next day. It's done. If you sell a popular player, they take the jersey off the next day.
That's not true. I know that if I eat the hearts of my enemies, I gain
That's true, actually. Yeah, it is very primitive thinking, isn't it?
Also, Fnatic was going to be bought by any football team. Should obviously be Tottenham Hotspur as well.
Fair. But yeah, I mean, honestly, it's like, it's crazy the way people think about esports orgs, and like, we still haven't learned the lesson yet. So I first of all, Roald, I don't know if you disagree, but I can't believe Fnatic is going to sell for 100 million. I can't believe any org would. And second of all, I don't believe they're going to be bought by like some primo sports organization. I think it's going to be like, I don't know. I don't even know how low down the totem pole it's going to go. Like Wolverhampton or whatever.
It might be like VfB Stuttgart.
It was like when Evil Geniuses announced that we've got a Premier League partner. Wolves.
So it's like that, by the most technical sense. Yeah, you are right. They are in the Premier League. My bad. They're one of the worst teams. Who gets it wrong?
I always found it intriguing how, also with other sports, how they approached esports. So like F1, for example, tried to do a lot with esports, and I think, football leagues as well. And it's not like, they tapped into the existing audience and tried to bring that over to their sport, right? Because that's where the value would be in the most obvious way. That seems to be the obvious thing that you're trying to achieve. But instead, they bring their own brand into esports. and then they just hope that fans arrive and that they could pull them back. It's like, but why don't you, leverage a let's say Fnatic, you partner with them and then you bring it in somehow or something like that, but yeah, I don't know, like, there's just such a lack of understanding, right, of how this space functions.
At least when NRG had like a sliver of money from Shaq, they did things with Shaq, and Shaq was willing to do things with them. To
even referenced them inside the NBA, bro. It's cool
exactly.
as fuck,
like shit like that just doesn't fucking happen anymore. I don't know what we're doing. Like, I really don't. It's crazy.
Well, I think to wrap this up, like the industry is looking more like its roots in many ways, and like what we've seen be successful is not the LCS, which is reaching its lowest viewership of all time. It's the DreamHack events in America that are drawing people to be part of a community in the way that they
DreamHack Atlanta especially has looked like a really good event. I mean, I went there one year. When I was living in Atlanta, when we were again working on E-League, it was pretty good. I did a live stream from the event, similar thing I'm talking about. There was like celebrities there. There were people playing, obviously Counter-Strike, but multiple games. There was like a board game thing, a card game thing, Waka Flocka Flame fucking concert on the evening. Like, so that they packaged together a really good experience.
That's what BlizzCon is too, right? It's panels with Blizzard, and it's a concert of, Metallica has fucking played BlizzCon. You know what I mean? And like, imagine you paying $300 for a weekend where you get to go to an esports tournament, a Metallica concert, and you get to see, all the latest news dropped from your favorite games and hang out around with everybody else who likes Blizzard games or who's your WoW guild or whatever. This is the kind of stuff that's not happening, but also, FACEIT still exists, but a lot of games are just kind of floundering without a way, especially team-based games like League of Legends, to build communities. The publishers, they don't have, as far as I'm aware, they don't really have like Discords to engage people in a community. Like, they can engage their broader community, but not like a competitive community, which is where esports came from, right? And a way to make sure that these players can actually meet each other.
I think a lot of these game publishers and game developers who have like the esports titles, so that's the Valves, the Riots, I guess the more traditional AAA game developers, they come from a time where you didn't have to build the community actively, right? Because if you wanted to play an FPS game in 2005, you had 3 options, right? You didn't have 1,000 options like today. So the community would form no matter what. If you play, Medal of Honor, you would build a community around that because you were there with lots of other people who would stick with that game for the next 5 years. Nowadays, there's so many freaking games being released every single day that, people move on very quickly. So it's the community doesn't naturally form because people don't stick around long enough to do it. So as a game developer or publisher, you actually need to put in some effort to build this and maintain your people. But I think a lot of them haven't caught up with the fact that this has completely changed. And also, again, going back to audiences, most of these AAA game titles are being played by older audiences. The young people are not playing these games. They're not spending money on it. It's too expensive. If they can buy, 15 Roblox games or 15, Steam indie titles for the same amount that they're spending on the next Call of Duty, if you put it like that, it's kind of obvious if you have the time to play all these games. So it's, there's still, I think, kind of a lack of understanding of actually what's happening at the root of the games industry and how people are behaving and what you actually need to do to speak to your player base. So, I mean, we talk about a lot of these issues in esports as well, but they exist in gaming in general and probably much broader than that too.
I'll tell you, we could do it, guys. We could do a last Free Nation live event, have an esports tournament there, do watch a movie in a cinema, then we do a live foreplay straight after the movie. We could do all of these things.
I'll pitch that. Let's see if we can get some sponsors. Let's see if we can get some sponsors. Because, for the right game, I think that is a possibility. We need publisher support, right? In order to make that happen with a game, but I do think it's possible.
Yeah.
It's the events like Beyond the Summit, is as a viewer, for me is like one of my favorite events that was there, because you actually felt connected to the player and to the commentator, right? There wasn't a very obvious desk in between us and the screen and this kind of almost fake charisma of something. You knew, players could say something that probably weren't allowed to say, and casters same thing, but it felt real.
Yeah.
And again, it all ties back to the same thing that we all know. And hopefully kind of, the DreamHacks and so on will help to solve the issue, because, as soon as that starts to show commercial success, you can't deny it anymore. So
no, one thing that's funny when you say that is that's another example of also where people don't realize we already had the core streaming aesthetic. It was Beyond the Summit, Home Story Cup. It already existed. It's just for some reason the TOs just went, la, that doesn't exist. And anyway, back to what I'm doing, which is trying to be a bad version of sports.
Yeah.
We just ignored it. Instead of the most obvious thing I would have ever done. If people don't know, the whole reason Home Story Cup even existed is Take, the guy who ran it, used to just work for ESL as the fucking StarCraft and Warcraft commentator. What I would have done from day one, as soon as he launched that service and it had massive fan uptake, is now all of my StarCraft tournaments that I EMs just have a second stream that's him anyway. I'd have just done that. They could have had, again, the biggest thing, it's too late now, obviously. The stupidest thing about the core streaming one is they had all the stallions in their stables. Kidral was on the LEC. Yeah. Everyone was. All these fuckers would have just done. And the joke is, if you hadn't let them see they could become giant entities on their own and have leverage and command all the money, they would have broken your hand off for just twice as much money to just be on your company and to go, I work for ESL, mum. That was the thing back then. So again, these companies are just so short-sighted, unfortunately.
Well, hopefully that gave you guys some insight into what we think about the future of esports. I actually think that it's probably trending in a pretty good direction again, but I hopefully the takeaway here is that we need to just lower our sights, right? The age of it being as big as sports and us being professional sports, that's over. It's fucking over. It didn't happen. We didn't grow that way. And I think it's just about optimizing for the audience that we do have right now instead of a pretend audience that clearly doesn't fucking exist, right? So the sites need to be lowered, but that doesn't mean, or at least changed to offer more variety. This isn't going to be, outside of very few events like League of Legends World Championship or a Counter-Strike major, I don't think esports events are going to succeed as destinations in and of themselves without supporting stuff around it. And if you look at the success of a DreamHack Atlanta versus the LCS finals in Arizona from this last weekend, there's a pretty big difference between those two things.
And I think a bigger picture thing that has been a thread through all the things we've talked about is what you actually need to tap into, and this isn't just some market nonsense, is more like the lifestyle or the frequency of what it means to be an esports person, as opposed to an individual does this thing that I invest in, make me money tomorrow off that. No, it's more like the idea of why does the kid spend thousands of dollars on silly cosmetic skins, but he won't buy a ticket to the best tournament and watch his favorite player play? There's a disconnect there where you need to make it feel as cool to buy the ticket and to go and see the live event and to be part of something, again, a moment and experience in a way that you don't get currently, because people definitely, they want to, it's like the fry meme from Trump, they want to spend the money, you're just not giving them a good reason to right now.
All right, guys. Well, thank you, Roald, for coming on.
I appreciate you, brother.
We'll see you for the next episode of the Four Horsemen. And as always, esports till end to est.